Hello and welcome back to the Raspberry Podcast. Today I am joined by the two ladies behind Women Who Fight. That is Marina Mavrou and Shanti Gorton. Women Who Fight is a resource, it's a website, it is a Instagram page that is all about promoting, empowering and educating women within combat sports, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I really like what they do. And I really like the way that they go about it. They are building a community. They are putting out some really important information, a lot of stuff that isn't well known by men or by women about sort of some of the individual challenges that women need to consider when they're doing any sport, and especially when they're doing combat sports. So I've wanted to talk to these ladies for a long time, and I thought when better than to do it for International Women's Day, which is today, if you're listening to the day that this episode is released. So yeah, managed to sit down and chat to them and spoke about, why they felt the need to set up Women Who Fight, what it's all about, what they're trying to do with it in the future, and also some of the issues around women in combat sports, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the moment, how to get more women into the sport and some of the kind of specific issues that women do face. So I really enjoyed this chat and I hope you enjoy listening. Check it out. Okay, so firstly, ladies, thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, it's lovely to do this.
Thank you for coming with all your
kit.
Tech.
Showing us how it's done.
Well, I'm trying. Like I said, this is my first, this is the first episode that I've done on my mobile rig traveling since I got rid of my studio where I've had two guests. So I had to bring all of my finest equipment.
Yeah.
But yeah,
impressive,
absolutely worth it for to have you two ladies on. How you doing?
Real good.
We're really
excited.
Excited
So nice.
to be on the Raspberry Podcast.
Oh, can I just say, I've got this thing where I keep calling you the strawberry ape.
Oh, I mean, look, there's worse fruit than strawberries.
I know, but it happens every time, and I'm like, it's like when you get something stuck in your head and you're in this loop, and I was like, strawberry. Nope.
You know what? If I could go back and change my name, I'd be the blueberry ape.
Would you?
Because an interesting bit of trivia is that I never ate a blueberry until I already had the nickname, the raspberry ape. I used to just love raspberries. It was like, it was my favorite fruit.
That's where it's from.
That's pretty much where it's from, yeah.
Oh.
And, I mean, boring, isn't it? I mean, you'd hope there was
So you said, all right, what shall I name my podcast? I like raspberries.
Well, no.
I look like an ape.
No. That's why I named myself the Raspberry Ape, because I like raspberries and I look like an ape. And then the podcast came after the nickname, so I just named the podcast the Raspberry Ape Podcast.
Would you now? What about tea ape?
The oolong.
The oolong ape.
I mean,
that's actually got a ring to it.
I mean, if I ever start a tea company, maybe I'll call it the Oolong Ape.
Be a natural progression, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the cogs turning now.
Yeah.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you two on the podcast. I feel like this whole episode might be us just giggling.
It might be.
So anyway,
you might have to just direct us.
I'll do my very best. I mean, it's definitely harder when you're two against one. So
There's double cogs.
Yeah, absolutely. So the women who fight, and I mean, I've wanted to have you guys on the podcast for a long time, and I just thought I wanted to get something out for International Women's Day, which is when this is going to be released. We're recording this a few days beforehand. Is it like Women's Month? Isn't all of March like...
we want to believe that.
Yes.
Yeah, why not?
Yes.
We can go with that, can't we?
I think we can go with that.
So I thought it'd be a good excuse to try and get you on for that day. And the Women Who Fight Instagram page is legitimately one of my favourite pages that I follow. And I'm being 100% serious, genuinely.
Tell us why.
Which is super weird, because I feel like I need to explain that.
Yeah.
Because
I feel like
it
you
doesn't
tell
make
all
any
your
sense.
guests this,
It's
don't
not. It's not aimed at me. But I just find it so interesting that the amount of information that you put out, and sort of the interesting information and sort of stuff that I would have no idea about otherwise when it comes to women, stuff, and it's stuff that we're going to talk about today, I'm sure, but stuff that a guy would never even, through no fault of their own, they just have no reason to think about like how women are affected by their cycle and how their recovery is affected by it, and how, all of these nuances that are very unique to women. And I just feel like not only is the general vibe of the page very positive and empowering and very inclusive, I don't feel like it's against men at all, but it's just kind of pushing women, and that's quite obvious. But also I just think educationally, I feel like I'm learning new stuff every time I go on there. So it's great.
That's really cool. I mean, the thing is, you say that guys don't know this stuff through no fault of their own, but I think women don't either. And I think that's the whole point. Like we were trying to break that down. Like we didn't have any idea. We started this nearly 4 years ago now, and we were like at a comp being like, I'm like stressing, I'm like, my period's being all weird, my diet, I don't know if I'm fueling right, I'm tired all the time. And we were having these conversations, and every single time we look online, all the information was for guys who trained, because that was the majority of the people who trained, and
that's the default.
And so that is actually a big aim of ours. It's just like, actually, I don't think enough women know either, and it should be in education. It should be at school. We should all be like, sex education's all right, but we need like health education.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I started a book today, funny enough, that one of my best friends, who is a woman who I've had on the podcast, Lisa Price, she was a competitive strongwoman, and she recommended me this book called Unwell Women, about I mean, I've literally just started it. I was listening to it on the way here, and it's about how much emphasis on men's health throughout the medical, historically in medicine, and how little they have focused on the unique health issues that would face women, or also people of color, where sort of medicine, all the research around medicine for hundreds and hundreds, possibly even longer, but definitely hundreds of years, has been based around white men, and it ends up with women being misdiagnosed really, really heavily. And even to this day, it's still an issue that a lot of women are facing, where lots more research is having to go into, sort of the unique health issues that women have versus men, because there's not a lot of study there.
Absolutely.
I mean, we were talking to a researcher very recently, and she was saying how complex it is to include women in your studies, or to have women the main subject of your study, because of all of these fluctuations that you have in a single month, whereas a guy wouldn't have any of that.
You reset every day. So as long as the tests are done at the same time, it's kind of like, that's a good parameter. But I think I was just thinking about what you're saying about the research being so
biased.
So biased. And they used to treat women like, it's like the same. They give the same information, but they reduce them. They used to like maybe reduce they didn't even do this before actually, but like they'd suggest drugs, which they'd worked really well for guys, and then they had to recall them, because the symptoms, the side effects for women were so bad. They were like, and then they had to like half doses, but this happens after the damage is sort of done.
And also, of course, like, not only the differences in men and women biologically, but then you also have fertility and childbirth and all of that stuff, and how drugs and how various things are going to affect that as well. And that's another thing that I know that you girls point out a lot on your page, which is, fertility and childbirth and training around that and stuff like that.
Absolutely. We're not, it's not, I mean, we're not in that stage yet, but it's fascinating.
Me and Marina, whenever we talk to someone who's had a baby or someone who's menopausal, we're like, tell us everything you know. I'm going to start preparing now for this. But also, like, we talk to women who've had a baby and who've trained. We had Grace Anderson on like our first or second podcast, and she'd had 2 babies, and she's PT, and she trained throughout the whole of her pregnancy, or her second pregnancy, and she said the difference was huge in like the birth, the experience of being pregnant, the recovery after. And women, like, historically are told to sit still and do nothing, avoid fish, and don't have one glass of wine.
But then of course, if you look anthropologically, women who are pregnant weren't expected to, you'd see women pregnant, working and gathering and doing all the stuff that they would be doing afterwards, and then just after the baby was born, they'd be carrying their babies and doing the same stuff. So, but I think that there's, and that isn't something that's unique to pregnancy. I think that this modern culture of rest is overprescribed for most things. I think for injuries as well, for both men and women. Certainly, it's been my experience and some of the research that I've done about injuries where it's almost the safest thing to say.
Yeah.
Because if you tell someone to rest,
What could go wrong
What
there?
could go wrong? It's sort of like, it's a default thing where you're not putting any blame on yourself if something goes wrong. But of course, because no one would think, okay, my leg injury hasn't recovered. You're never going to think it hasn't recovered because you've rested. But in reality, you can significantly slow down a progress with an injury if you rest it. Sometimes an injury or an ailment or a condition actually needs activity in order for it to stimulate that recovery. So, yeah.
What was your injury that sort of took you down that finding all those things out?
It was mainly my back injury, to be honest with you. And that, it's something that I'm not sure I've mentioned before, which is a joke because I talk about it all the time. My back injury was a big one where I was prescribed rest so much and the rest never really helped. And it was actually kind of steering into the injury, so to speak, and actually working it more, which is, if you've got something that's wrong, you've got to train it. You've got to make it stronger opposed to avoiding it and actually making it even worse. So I've seen a lot of stuff, and I'm reading more stuff about people who, even with stuff as like broken bones, putting broken bones in splints, and actually that can be a negative thing. And, and this is not particularly new research, but stuff that goes against the standard RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation, that actually that's not what you should be doing with a lot of injuries, and actually keeping it moving, and heat can help. And stuff like that, and that resting and isolating stuff can be a negative in some cases.
I think that's so much in that. I hurt my shoulder years ago. I had someone in a Kimura, and it was strength against strength, and I refused to do something. I tore something in my shoulder basically. But I won.
Was this in a competition?
Was it worth? No.
I was going to say
it was not.
It's an interesting thing where some people are just willing to maim themselves for an extra tap in a roll.
That was my ethos when I started. I was like, you can have my arm. I'm going to take you down there.
I mean, I one of my students once had a clock. I always tell this story because it's so funny. He had a clock choke on someone, and he was so determined to finish this a bow and arrow choke. He was so determined to finish this bow and arrow choke that he spiral fractured 3 fingers whilst doing it. And you just imagine him there and thinking, either I can let go of this submission. I mean, not in competition. This was like a Wednesday night in gi class, and he's just rolling with some random guy, and he's thinking, I can either let go of this, or I can get the tap and shatter my hand and not be able to train for about 6 months. And he chose the latter. It's just interesting. Some people are just willing to risk it all.
You know what? I used to have this thing in my head where I'd be like, they'd have have a wrist lock, or they'd have my arm, and I'd have this thing where I was like, I wish I could just leave my arm behind. And it's how I play chess. Like
a gecko.
Yeah, it's how I play chess. I am so take whatever you want. I don't care. I'm gonna barrage through this, and I'm losing. I always sacrifice so much
in the name of progress, development, which you call it in chess.
Which often isn't actually what happens.
But it's nice to say I went out on my shield.
I really went for it. I lost everything. But I hurt my shoulder doing this really stupid thing. She was absolutely didn't hurt her at all. And then I still this was 4 years ago. If I do pull-ups and if I do certain, I think they're pulling, it likes to be pulled, it stops hurting. But as soon as I stop doing it, I have this deep, deep ache that nothing. I've seen osteos, and she's done, I've got an osteo who's fantastic, and she's done a marvellous job, but I have to do pull-ups, which I still can't do.
Is it still there? The pain is still there?
Do awful reversals. All down. Yeah. I'll be there forever. Yeah, I'll be there. I don't know what. I did something, but anyway, using it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was my point.
But I mean, we somehow got there. We've got someone breaking their finger doing a bow and arrow from pregnancy.
Bodes well.
Back to that. Yeah, I think training around pregnancy is a really interesting thing, and it is. I mean, I think it goes so against our natural culture, especially in this country, and in the West, where it should be when you're pregnant, you sit at home, you sit on the sofa, your partner brings you food and massages your feet, and actually you don't do anything, and then you see these awesome women like Leonie, who recently had her baby, where they're just training, and they're rolling to a certain point, and then they're just drilling, and then they're still in the gym doing pull-ups and squats and stuff. And
we were researching just before you came, what Mackenzie Dern has done.
Yeah.
Because she's
a month after having a baby, she was back in training.
And 4 months after, she was actually had a fight
in UFC, like
in the UFC.
Phenomenal.
And I was just
Phenomenal.
And she's 28 now, so she would have been, 25 or 6. And her body just like, because she was so consistent with her training, it was just back.
Yeah.
Like the shape, she was completely...
In my culture, if you are a pregnant woman and you're in martial arts, you will be crucified.
Yeah.
Really?
I think, what are you doing? You're putting your baby's life at risk.
Wow.
And they see you rolling.
I think that's that's still sort of an undercurrent though, isn't it? It's that like, sit at home, what are you doing? Don't do too much.
Yeah. It goes back to, if you're resting, surely nothing can go wrong. Where, maybe by erring on the side of extreme caution, you're actually taking away some huge benefits that you could get from being active.
Also, I guess like, I'm not a doctor, but this is just, I feel like we've spoken to someone about this, where it's actually, you're using your body, a lot of oxygen's going around, you're actually giving more nutrients potentially to the baby, because you're using your body and getting the blood going. I don't know.
And also delivery is better.
Oh yeah.
When you're fitter.
Definitely.
And you imagine, if you're continuing the train throughout your pregnancy, you're probably going to be eating better, because you're not, especially if you're an athlete to begin with, how difficult it must be psychologically to kind of take yourself out of this this lifestyle that you've been living for potentially many years, and suddenly go, okay, well, now I'm pregnant, I can't train and I can't lift, and I'm not going to do anything that I usually do, and it can really take you out of what you're used to.
Definitely. And I feel like anyone who does a lot of exercise, there's mental impact, right? There's,
all of these endorphins.
All these endorphins and all the community, like losing that. I would send...
Or just sitting and watching. How boring.
Yeah. Steam coming out your ears.
Would you just sit out?
I mean, when I'm injured, occasionally I'll... yeah, I go sit and watch. I think
and heckle.
Yeah, usually go, oh god. I mean, it's quite hard to do. Whenever I've been injured, I've tried to. I think one big part of it is keeping the schedule. If you go training at 6:00 on a Monday, then if you're injured, go at 6:00 on a Monday. If you've got nothing better to do, keep going, because it means that you're not going to get out of the schedule of going. But also, it kind of keeps your mind in the game, and it's this double-edged sword, because it's also super frustrating.
Yeah.
Because you go and watch and be like, oh man, I really want to be training, but yeah, I do try. When I'm injured, I will still go and I'll just watch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you do that?
I wouldn't. Just sit out and watch the others. Oh, did you have a good role, love? No, I wouldn't. I'd sit in the sofa, watch Netflix and eat. That's the worst.
Well, those are pretty much the two different paths that you could go down.
There's two.
Yeah. Or sit on the sofa and watch jiu-jitsu. You get a bit of half and half, right?
Yeah. I don't know about you guys. My boyfriend watches a lot of MMA, and I've gotten really into watching it with him. And whenever I watch, particularly fighting, like whenever they punch or do something, I twitch, because I'm like, oh yeah, like,
I'm feeling it,
moving my head back and forth. He's like, stop moving, we'll sit over there. It's like,
I mean, you could get into it a little bit, can't you?
But it's like, what happens when you watch? It's sort of like, because you want to be in it. You're like,
yeah, you definitely get a bit of adrenaline watching some of those big fights.
Yeah, oh God. Yeah.
Anyway, you sort of kind of going back to women who fight. You kind of mentioned it earlier, but I wanted to know sort of, why did you start this? What was the intention behind it, which you've kind of gone into, but I'd like you to elaborate a little bit. And yeah, what was the whole thinking with it?
Yeah. As Shanti said, it was a cold night. No, it was. When was it? It was in a competition.
It was at
I think it was on English Open.
Yeah.
English.
Is it the end
English
of
Open.
Is it the end?
We were sitting, and we were talking about periods and PMS. PMS, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know, because I keep referring to it, thinking that everyone knows, PMS is the premenstrual syndromes. So we were talking about PMS, I think, and how to train around it. And we were like, what do you do? Well, I don't know. What do you do? And then what do we eat then? Well, I don't know. And anything that you're trying to find back then, anything that we tried to find online, it was very limited. Whereas if you look for nutrition, so many plans will be right in front of you on your screen, but it's just for men. And we were like, why don't we create a platform where women from martial arts can go in and find the information they want, And it was Sunday. I think we met on a Monday. We
It was
to
like, let's do
Costa.
this. Next day, went to Costa. We met the guy who made our coffees.
And you bought the daddy.com something.
What?
You bought a domain.
What did I buy?
That's a whole different
A
thing.
domain. Didn't you?
Okay, I used the
GoDaddy.
GoDaddy. Sorry.
Let's just clarify that.
Sorry.
She did not go on daddy.com.
Yeah, just glad to clarify that. I want to go GoDaddy.
Marina, you promised me you wouldn't tell anyone.
I'm not supposed to share that.
Bloody hell. I need to rehearse.
Did you girls know each other? Did you train with?
We trained. We both
trained.
at Carlson's.
Okay.
We trained together, yeah.
You started a bit before me, but we were like on the similar page of like figuring everything out.
Figuring it, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And,
Both
and we're
clueless.
still doing that.
Yeah.
Like any piece of information that comes, we're like, Shanti, look.
Yeah.
Did you know that? Shit, we need to
Yeah,
publish.
yeah. We get very excited about like really like research articles. Like, ooh.
Yeah. So sort of, what's the process with that? Because you post a lot. You're really consistent, and it seems to be pretty. You're not posting the same thing over and over again. Are you scouring the internet for research and information and articles?
We
and
go
stuff?
through phases of scouring.
Well, but before you answer that, do you want to say exactly what we do? Because we've got many strands.
Okay,
to what we do.
and then you can fill in what I.
Well,
forget.
I think you're gonna be great. Go on.
So how we started was we started by just trying to get anyone who knew anything to talk to us, which when you're no one, and we had a webpage with nothing on it, it was obviously quite difficult. I remember when we first actually created Women Who Fight, and then we tried to join BJJ Femmes as Women Who Fight, and they were like, who are you? And we were like, oh, and they sort of were like, that you have to, like, this is a community, like, how do we know that you're not
Oh my God, I was so
Like-
scared back then. It was like, who are you? Are you a man in disguise?
Yeah, they were very fair enough suspicious because
Yeah.
we didn't have a face at the time because we were literally, I think we drew up the logo and we're like, okay, let's just whack that on and let's just have something. Anyway,
And that's something that happens. Like guys pretend to be
Exactly.
like women pages.
I have got,
So-
all right, the app, the Women Who Fight Facebook group, all right?
Yeah.
The Open Mat. Women Who Fight Open Mat. I've got men trying to join
trying
in.
to join it,
Women Who Fight. Women Who Fight. What do you not understand, love?
which says underneath it for women who fight.
Just in case you didn't catch that.
In case you didn't catch what's in the title. But so we started out by trying to find articles, and we were very website based and very. So I think we tried to get in contact with doctors, and we had these questions that we had and that we knew a lot of other women would have. So about periods, what's good to eat before you train and after you train, because we're also smaller, we've got different hormones. I don't know if we didn't know, like, does the same food apply? Like, what's this whole thing about like carbohydrates and, alcohol impact on women is so different. It's so different. And, also the smaller stuff like hair. I've lost so much hair in
Skin.
jiu-jitsu. Every time it's like rip. And it was stuff like how to what's the good hairdo to keep your hair out the way, stuff like that. And I think we started with that, and we were trying to get in touch with, one of our first interviews was Chris Cyborg, actually.
Yeah.
But it was all written.
And Michelle Nicolini.
And
like
Michelle
the big
Nicolini.
names were so willing to help.
That was amazing.
Angelica Galvao.
Yeah.
These are the first people that it
Yeah.
was just written.
It was two girls in the UK be like, hello, can you send us some articles? And I remember and then we'd interview. We started going, okay, well, we need to interview them. We don't want it just to be written. We want to actually meet them and explain who we are so they understand what we're about. And then I would type them up, and it would just be this. And I love writing, but I'm not a writer. I don't, I'm not. It's not my forte. So they were questionably written. But then we started trying to get more articles written by other people. We thought, well, let's outsource. So then I think we were getting. I can't remember some of our earliest ones.
Charlotte, the dietitian.
Oh, Charlotte de Bougony.
De Bougony.
Yeah, she's French. And she was our first person. Yeah, that was about nutrition, but that wasn't sports related. But we were trying to find, it was very hard to find a nutritionist who's sports related at that time. I think we'd really struggled, and we'd reached out, but she was one of the ones that came back. So I think at the beginning it was like we'd reach out, and then about 10% of them would actually be like, yes.
Mostly was just emails out.
Yeah,
Emails out.
so many emails out. And we used to meet in Costa, and that was like as much as we possibly could at the beginning. And I think we did quite a lot. Our website was on Wix. It sort of did the job. But I think we've evolved so much. And I think a lot of that happened over COVID.
Yeah, COVID
was a bit of a game changer, because I suddenly was like, I work in film, and that's very much an in-person industry. You know, you can't possibly really do that online. So I was like at home, just like, let's build a website. Let's do this properly. And so I spent like 6 months building us a new website. And we were like, I think then we realized that our interviews, like, I think that was when we interviewed you.
Yeah.
And Emma.
But that wasn't Google Meet.
That was on Google Meet. That was one of our first ones.
I still see the quality, and I'm like crying inside. No, it was so good to be that bad quality.
You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. It definitely felt like and then I think one of our things has always been like, anything that we can find which is remotely interesting, we want to share, because I think we want to be the bridge between people who do the research and who know the stuff and people who would like to know the stuff. But one of our main things is trying to get the people who know the stuff to write it and express it in a way that we can understand without having to like go and learn all these other words,
terminologies,
the stuff that's not relevant, and making things relevant. And well, what am I missing?
Well, for a research to reach the medical industry, it takes how many years?
Oh, like a few.
So 3 to 5 years.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
So
it's a super long process.
Yes. So if the research is here, sitting and waiting to be picked, we need to have someone that actually conveys it to the people that need it. And we're talking about, athletes need it. And if you look at the athletes that we know, these people, most of them have another job, so they're trying to juggle, having a baby, having another job, training, and it might be that there's so much noise going on in their social media that they don't pick the right information,
and there's so much false. That was the other thing. We were like, there's so much stuff which doesn't either make sense or I know it's wrong. Just intuition, like that can't be right, but some people follow it. And so the other thing was like, let's make sure that all the information we have is real, it's true. Yeah. That's why it was so important to us to actually have researchers who are like, okay, this is actually, if anyone wants to dig deeper, here's the research paper. And also one thing we've been able to do is share surveys they're looking out for, or they need people to come in and do stuff. So actually then connecting scientific studies with the people who it's for, like, and they can go and actually be involved. And then what else do we do? We also talked to athletes, because...
Well, yeah, we started by talking to athletes and seeing how, their perspective. But now I think we've reached now, because we're growing, people trust us, and so we have big names coming up in the next few weeks. But we also want to, after lockdown, because lockdown was mainly online, our online presence. So after lockdown, we thought, we need to make these a more physical presence. We need to meet people, go out, and organize stuff.
Because we had an online community, but we wanted to make it physical.
How did the open mat come up?
Well, I think we wanted to do one for a while, because I think training with. I think we just wanted to do one. We were like, it was literally like, let's get women together. We're and our background is BJJ, and we don't want to be exclusive in that. We want to branch out and be somewhere that women who train MMA can go to, and judo and all those combat sports. But I think we started with BJJ because that was our home turf, and also we saw there was a need for it. Like, we spoke to women who were like, yeah, I love that. It was clear that it was wanted. And you want to keep it,
not affiliated to any gym, so that you can have anyone. And when our first one in Faison, it was so pleasing to see so many girls, and very nice and positive vibes, no ego. I was like, this is great.
And the laughter.
Yeah,
there was so much laughing going on, and so much it was so relaxed, and like girls were going for it, but it was so at like their own pace.
Well, I remember our intro was like, if you have PMS and you're gassy, just tell the person next to you, because they've been there and they know it, and everyone clicked. I had a friend who has endometriosis, so she suffers from pain, and she was like, I could tell anyone. I was like, sorry, I'm on my period. Can we tone it down a little bit?
Yeah, don't touch my belly or I will cry.
And I'm because, you know, the open mats that you girls are running, they seem to be, I mean, super successful. You're getting so many, like an unbelievable amount of women training at the same time. And everyone that I've seen that has gone to them has absolutely loved them. Like the feedback seems to be amazing. I know that women's only seminars has been something that's happened sort of sporadically over the past 10 years. I mean, there was a lot of controversy at one point where guys thought it was unfair that women could train together, which is so bizarre, isn't it? I mean,
like, what? But what about a men's class?
You're like,
every class is men's class.
But like that's actually like genuinely true. That, you know, I travel around and I do a lot of seminars, and there'll be plenty of gyms where there is not a single woman there, and it wouldn't be considered. It's something you don't even think about. Like, you go there, you teach a seminar, and you wouldn't, if you weren't even looking out for it, you wouldn't even clock it. And it's actually, if there's a seminar with 5 or 6 women on the mat, you're going, wow, that's a lot. You know, this gym's doing something good about this. So yeah, it was always funny. And then of course you had Sam Cook, who was really running a lot of Womanars, yeah. And I think guys seem to accept after a while, from my perspective anyway, it seemed like there's a lot less pushback on that guys started to realize that they weren't like meeting up to gossip about men, and that women just wanted to train together, and it didn't threaten them in any way. But I don't think I've seen any like the open mat that you're doing, which is just you come and you train, and kind of you're alluding to it a little bit there, but it seems like the atmosphere is really different to how women would be training in a mixed class, a mixed open mat, even in like a really women-centric gym, even in one where they felt really comfortable. Is it that different? And you're like, don't get me wrong, you're allowed to say yes.
Well, in my eyes, please correct me if my eyes don't see what you see, but in my eyes, it's a space where you can say whatever you want about anything very, very personal. So if like in a mixed class, I would never talk about how gassy I am, ever. Yeah. I'm very, I would never say, I might fart, I felt I'm feeling very, very, it's an open space where I can talk to each other, and yes, I don't know all of the women that come, but it's a nice way to just get to know each other. Whereas in a gym setting, if I go to an open mat to another gym, I might not connect with women as much. It's more territorial. When you go to someone's gym, you want to, cover your ground, make sure that you're good enough, show your skills, prove something, yeah. and your ego is a little bit higher. Yeah. And I'm talking about myself.
No, I think there's a lot of I agree with everything. I think a sense of having to prove, for my experiences in normal classes, and less so now because I've done it for a while, and I'm if someone's being shitty when I'm rolling with them, it's like, well, that's your problem, not mine. But I do know that when I first started, a lot of it, when you're rolling, and there's one other girl, either you've got to fight her and prove yourself against her because you're being compared inevitably, or you're rolling with guys who are, I'm 62 kilos, like every guy is going to be bigger than me, really. And so then it's like, this is why I hurt myself so much, was because I'd be like, no, I'm here and I'm putting everything I can in. And actually, it's like, I am trying to prove myself all the time, and at the risk of getting injured. Whereas there's something, I think competing is always suggested as a really good way for women to go and roll with women. But then again, it's in a really high intensity situation. Yeah. You're still being judged. Obviously there's a place for it, but if you just want to roll and meet other women so that you can connect and potentially meet up for rolling later. And I think that was one of the things we wanted to do. We were like, let's get these women meeting each other. Like, let's get them so they're like, oh man, I'm only at the gym down the road. I didn't even know you existed. Please, can you come and train with me? And it is about being open. It's about creating a really safe space. I mean, for women who wear hijab, or, people who don't want to show like their hair, or, maybe something like that. It's also, there's no guys there. We have had to have a male photographer sometimes, but there's no chance they're going to roll with another guy. Like, and for a lot of people, that's like a godsend. Like, I think when we're there, everyone there is just smiling. They're like, this is amazing. I mean, at my gym, you know, the last few times I've gone, it's just been me. I'm the only girl.
Oh my God.
And that's really hard. And, you know, all the guys are fantastic. And I would not want to I wouldn't want a women's only gym. It's not about being like, I think we should split this in half and we should go over there. And it's like, no, I love rolling with guys. They have so much to offer, but you need a balance. And I think that's what we're trying to create, is a space where it's like you can find that.
And you need to see what works. Because with guys, you're like, are you letting me do this? Am I doing it because I'm really good, or because you're giving me the... You know, it's very, very weird, this dynamic, this balance. And sometimes, like, guys go super hard and you're like, oh, you're going to injure me. Or they go super light and you're like...
Do something.
You're underestimating me. Like, find the balance. And I do understand that it might be very hard for an 80-kilo guy to be like, all right, what sort of strength am I using?
Yeah.
I mean, I had this argument with Thomas during lockdown. I was like, you are hurting my back. Like, try not to put all of your pressure in my hips. And we were like, all right, how are we going to work it out? Let's change the position. Let's try other positions. And it's hard. I do understand it's hard. But then we are on the other side, you know, not exposing ourselves to what's the reality. So in a competition, what am I going to face?
Yeah.
That's why we created this competition, Euros competition prep.
Yeah.
So that was
amazing.
Phenomenal. Is my volume okay?
Yes.
It was
getting
phenomenal. It was phenomenal. So because we knew, all right, Dan, listen to me and look at... because we knew that if you put women that are about to go to Euros and fight, to, you know, train against each other, they would go nuts. We started, after the drills and the warm-up, we started with bad positions. So you kill all of the ego. So everyone is in a bad position.
Yeah.
Everyone has fucked up.
Yeah.
And then you reset and you go, all right, normal round.
Oh, because we did Shark Tank, didn't we?
Yeah. Shark Tank. It was the best.
It was great. And me and Marina, I was a bit ill and Marina wasn't feeling very well either. She had a period. So we were both just wandering around. I'd like lost a voice, but I was just like, we weren't training. So we were just being like, right, okay.
You were just like riling everyone else up.
We were just like,
it was amazing.
Let's really fuck everyone up.
Amazing.
It was amazing. And I do feel, I mean, what is it like for you rolling with a girl?
It's really hard. I mean, this is sort of a discussion that when you talk about women doing jiu-jitsu, inevitably you end up talking about. And I feel like the advice that is given is like, it doesn't work. It's this thing where you're right. There's like a balance that you have to find between not going too hard and not going too gentle, and the sort of that spectrum is so broad, and the perfect area is so precise that it's essentially impossible to find it. You will either go a little bit too hard or you'll go too gentle. And I think, you know, me personally, I would always veer very much on the too gentle side, especially being someone, you know, I'm 90 kilos, and I don't want to be crushing anyone and looking like an arsehole. So I find rolling with women to be a nightmare, especially when they're good grapplers, because I'm like, try not to use any strength, and then they're like legitimately beating the shit out of me. Like genuinely, like a lot of when I used to roll with Leonie, when I roll with Sam, when I roll with, I mean, even some of the lower level girls, women have the ability. I don't understand why. Maybe it's like the smaller shoulders. Women's side control, that shoulder pressure that they put in, it's just better than any guy that I've ever done it with. I've said this so many times.
Maybe smaller surface
I think it's a
so
small shoulder
yeah.
just getting in. Or they just get in position. They think I'm going to crush the patriarchy right now.
No.
But, you know, legitimately, and, you know, a really interesting thing is a big difference in the flexibility and mobility, especially in the spine. Women have the ability, in my experience, to have freaky mobility for their upper body and their lower body to almost detach.
I saw you on Cleo's watching like a fight of a very, very bendy grappler, and you were like, his mind
my
was blown.
My faces when I'm refereeing
away.
Kleos have been known to be a little bit out there. But I remember, and it's weird because obviously when you train for a long time, like I have, there's a certain expectation in how you expect a opposing body to move and how it's going to react to certain things. And I remember doing some rounds with Leonie, for example, and you'd sweep someone and their hips would go in one direction, and of course you're expecting the upper body to follow, but the upper body doesn't move. You're like, but this doesn't make any sense. Like, I've swept you and your legs are facing up, but your upper body's still facing down. So there's certainly, I think a lot of it is to do with familiarity. I think that's a big thing. I think someone who I did a lot of rounds with, for example, Abby O'Toole, who was a student of mine when I was teaching at Mill Hill for a couple of years. She was I believe, the only female that I had in my classes for about a year.
That must be so hard.
Yeah,
Wow.
but she was like legit badass, and she would like beat the crap out of a lot of guys. And we used to roll quite a lot. And I think the more you roll with someone, the better you work out where you sit with them. If they're physically strong, it's a lot easier. I mean, like when I roll with Emma Percy, when I see her, I'm good friends with Emma, and the last time I roll with her, she's so tiny. She's so absolutely tiny that you're like, I can't, but then also an absolute savage, and I'm just like running around with her choking me on my back the whole time. So it's legitimately hard, it's I feel like the advice that is given to guys when it comes to rolling with women is way easier said than done. It's one of the few things where, like, I'm going to stick up for guys, be like, it's not that easy. You can't just, because you'll see some stuff where don't smash them. So you don't smash them, like, but don't go too light, and you're like, what am I going to do? So,
but one important thing to put in an asterisk is do not explain the technique whilst the technique is done.
Don't do the mansplaining.
Oh my god!
I mean that's something that no one should do ever.
No.
Right? That's
so
something.
bad.
Especially when they're like lower and belt, and you're like, dude.
Well, I think I imagine is sort of. Do you feel condescended a lot? Like naturally, do you feel like that's something that you may be susceptible to when you're grappling against men?
Everyone's so different. There are some guys who are condescending, and I learn that, and then I'm like, okay, well, and also generally people who are really condescending I don't know, they don't necessarily roll so well, because that's sort of what's going on in like with me. But like so many guys aren't like, not at all. Like it's totally. And
the guys that are, to follow that up, do you think that and this is kind of the more nuanced, the more interesting question, do you think it comes from a genuine place of they're trying to help you,
yes,
but it's coming off the wrong way, or they're actually being arseholes?
I think it entirely depends.
I don't think. I mean, you must be very weird to want to be an asshole. I think you are an asshole without knowing it.
I've seen it. Yeah? I have seen it.
No. I'm not saying it's not. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I'm not sure how much thinking there is prior to the action that's condescending.
Yeah.
I feel like it's an extension of our society, though, because stereotypically, there's mansplaining's a word because it's a thing, and I think that it's just guys take it into the gym, and they sometimes think, oh, I managed to armbar you even though I'm a lower belt, I must know more. Maybe. And you're like, well, you're also twice my weight. Maybe that's got something to do with it. And I don't have any problem with losing anymore, like I used to. But so if a guy's much bigger and stronger, it's interesting because I think it's hard for guys to roll with girls, but I also, the way that I come into any role with any new guy, I come in really gently. Doesn't matter if they're big or small, because they need to know, like, I used to come in hard, and then the biggest problem I've ever found with rolling with a guy is if they explode.
Yeah. That
is when I've been injured, because my knee is in the wrong place and they just go through my knee, or they explode and they I've had a really bad eye injury, and or I've had a neck. Once I was rolling with a guy, I was on his back and he rolled forwards onto my neck, and it was like, I should have, if now I did that, I would have jumped off. But I was a white belt and I had no idea what to do. And it was because it's like these decisions which are like, they're not thought through. The best rolls I have is when a guy is aware of his weight, he doesn't explode, and there's it's speed. I love speed. Like cardio, like let's go and let's scramble.
The best people I've rolled with, and I think you would agree, Shanti, are the men that are smaller, because they know how to survive in a gym full of big boys, and they've been very technical in order to do that. So they come to you with the speed and technique, and you're like, this is amazing. So every time I go to a class, I'm like weighing people. I say, how much do you weigh? Under 60? No. Under 70? So that's how I gauge.
And they're going to be closer to your size and weight.
And you want these smaller people, because the attributes that they have are better. That's not general. I'm not generalizing, but I'm just saying.
I think what's interesting as well, though, is when you're rolling. Would you now tell a guy, because we've all rolled with someone who's too rough, and you're like, you're going to hurt me. Like, it's just a matter of time, because you're landing. Like today, someone landed on my hip. Like, he was just being a bit clumsy, and it was like, it happens. We all get injured sometimes, but it's like, would you ever tell a big guy, or anyone, you're rolling way too hard and I can feel an injury is about to happen? Because
I don't. This is so bad. I'm running bloody women who fight, and I'm not. To be fair, this is shame on me. Shame on me, because I should be comfortable on my skin to say, you're going.
It's hard.
Way out of line. I mean, I'm not saying anything to anyone that stinks, that has a gi, that's stinky. I need to learn how to do that. I need to start talking. I mean, I'm saying what I'm saying.
It is really difficult, though, and I think it goes back to sort of just awkwardness, right?
Yes.
And this is like a natural human thing, and it takes a lot of courage, really, to actually have a confrontation that would be very, very easy for you to just walk away and ignore it.
Exactly.
And it's something that I've had to deal with as an instructor as well. And that could come in many, many different forms, where you have to tell someone off, basically, because someone's doing something out of line. And it could be they're rolling too hard. It could be that their gi stinks. It could be a whole number of different things. And a lot of the time, our natural human instinct is to avoid these things, and then they literally go away. But obviously, you haven't actually sorted out the problem. So
and the problem is that this recycles. If you don't stop it, this person is going to go to another woman and do the same thing, which is a problem, and I need to address it.
I remember I rolled with a guy, bless him. He hadn't washed his gi from the night before, because he said he didn't have time.
I remember. She was crying afterwards.
I cried afterwards.
I mean, just to visualize there, a gi so bad in smell that it reduced someone to tears.
Do you remember? It's right
it's pretty
in your face.
Yeah.
It's there.
I mean, it's one of like the basic rules of grappling, right? Is like wash, be clean yourself, and make sure that everything you're in. I mean, I watched someone back, and this is the time that I certainly did say something. Someone was cleaning their rash guard, not even a gi. I mean, rash guards are easy to clean. Yeah. They had a rash guard drenched in sweat, and they were drying it.
No.
I think from the day beforehand as well, even worse. They were drying it in front of the heater that we had. And I was like, dude, you are not putting that gi on and rolling in my class. There is just absolutely no way it's happening. Go home. It was just disgusting. Could you imagine that?
Oh my God.
Putting a sweaty gi back on.
Did he go home and come back with a new one?
I can't remember.
No. Did he ever do it again?
I think he might have stopped training. with me anyway.
Well, if I can't wear it twice.
I don't class that as a loss.
No, definitely not. I mean, I rolled with two guys who's reduced me to tears because of their smell. And the second time, I actually told him.
Oh, really?
And he was so embarrassed. He left the mat. And what I was trying to say was that I'm really sorry. When did you last wash your gi? It really smells pretty bad. Maybe you could borrow one from downstairs, and I'm happy to roll with you. And he just went bright red and went, oh. And then he left, and I was like, oh, he's gone to get a new gi. He just didn't come back.
Yeah.
But then I rolled with him a week later, and he had a clean gi.
I mean,
look, you saved the society.
I was just about to say, you might have saved a lot of people.
That was really good.
But the thing is, when I saw him, I was like, I'm going to roll with you because it's not personal. Because it's not. It's just be clean. And I think that's not too bad.
Yeah, no, that is hygiene in grappling is super important.
Just even for infections.
And you know what? We notice it.
I think women are more sensitive to smells as well.
Like, sometimes Thomas doesn't. He's like, "Does that smell?" I was like, "Yes, this smells very bad.
Can we burn it?"
Right.
But then I also think that there's something in that men are sort of less sensitive to the smell of man, if that makes sense. Like a guy will, like, I'll walk into a gym that's like a little bit of a, you know, a classic stinky MMA, and it smells of musty men. And I imagine a woman walking in there would go, "This is one of the most disgusting places I've ever been in my life," and refuse to go in there. So I think that it's natural that that men are just used to the stench of men more than women are.
Maybe.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Am I allowed? So you've been around for sorry.
You've been around for absolutely.
I have been around for ages.
You've been around since the start of these. You were a fundamental person
since
in
the
this.
Big Bang.
Yes, exactly.
Been around.
So tell me, how did you see women's involvement into BJJ and martial arts grow? Because you have.
You've been there.
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
the kid.
I mean, you know, you're right. It's and it's kind of something that I wanted to ask you, because you're a lot more on the ground. You know, like particularly you two individuals, not just as women, but as women who run these open mats and who are super involved with the women in the jiu-jitsu community in the UK, especially. It is amazing the difference between now and back in the day. I mean, I remember training with women, but there would be one woman on the mat. You know, would be pretty standard. It was a time that, you know, the idea of a woman black belt was ludicrous. You know, when I first started jiu-jitsu, there were no male black belts that were UK born. You know, even the idea of a black belt. You know, I trained last night, and we're in a very small gym in North London in Barnet. There were 12 black belts on the mat. And there was a time where there were not 12 black belts in the country, you know, UK-born black belts in the country, and there were 12 UK-born black belts on the mat at one time. Wow. I mean, it just the advancement, the speed that it's advanced in that regard is huge. And in terms of women, you know, there's been different generations of women coming up, sort of kind of that you can classify as sort of eras for women in grappling, but the number of women that you see training at the open mats that you guys run is sort of unfathomable. 40, 50 women training together. The idea of that is sort of crazy, and it's so impressive, and it just goes to show how much the sport has come along, and I'm sure it's got so much further to go. But I think a big part of that is women going up through the ranks, getting their brown belts, getting their black belts, and you know, we had sort of that first generation of women black belts with Leone and with Sam, and you know how well Fion's done, and you know Fion's gone to be such a star internationally, and you know, just one of the most inspirational people in the sport. I mean, sort of every single woman I know, and some of them who don't even train jiu-jitsu, just think, you know, look at her, and I think having individuals like that. And she's super cool and super nice, and she's funny and she's down to earth, and I think having someone like that, just women who come into the sport, or people may see her doing something, smashing up some tournament, beating some bigger girl in a tournament, or winning something, coming back with medals, and think, I can do this. Like, there's a space for me here. And that was something that just didn't exist in the UK until relatively recently, with like Leone and with Sam and with Christine McDonald. I apologize, Christine. But you know, there was a load of women, and you know, we have stuff now like Joanna White in Southampton setting up this women's only tournament, which, funnily enough, I mean, as soon as it was announced, a friend of mine messaged me. I almost set up a women's only grappling show about 6 or 7 years ago. Like,
no, you didn't.
Yeah, I swear on my life.
No.
I mean,
what was it going to be called?
To the point, I don't remember what I was going to call it.
Fighting.
It might have been, but I had. I'd spoken to all of the women that I wanted to invite, because it was a point, and the reason why I did it, very simply, was that there were the women who were competing at the highest level in the UK jiu-jitsu women who were competing at the highest level were game to fight anyone. And at that time, there wasn't the male equivalent. the guys who were fighting would not, oh, they're 2 weight classes below me, oh, they're 3 years younger than me. They just wouldn't, it would have been impossible. I wanted to run a no time limit 8-person tournament with a big prize at the end, and it would have been infeasible to get the men to do that, and they'd agree to do it and then they pull out. But I knew that the women would be game, so I think it was going to be like Leonie and Sam and Christine and I think Caroline Cariello and a few of the other girls, Rosie Sexton, and I'd messaged them. They were like all game. I'd spoken to Tatami. I'd like got sponsorship, and I was just trying to look for a venue, and then I sort of never found anywhere, and it never happened. So it's really, yeah. But like
just because of the venue.
I mean, that's sort of like the venue's a big thing. It was just like I was sort of getting into the logistics and looking for somewhere, and then I ended up doing something else and sort of abandoning the project, and it just getting away from me a little bit. So it was super cool to see Joanna starting to organize this, and I think we're in a place now where it's much easier to do that. There's so many more women competing through all of the ranks, and I offered I will probably be there doing commentary for that event as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. But stuff like that was, the opportunities for women is so much bigger now, and it's super cool. And the number of women that are doing it is super cool. And you've got people like Fionn to look up to.
Do you know what? I think it was catalytic in this change when you have a woman giving seminars to both sexes.
Yeah.
So I saw
you're right.
so many men attending Fionn seminars, and I'm like, yes, exactly that. This change coming about.
You're absolutely right, and you're spot on. There was a time where women would give seminars, but they'd only be women's seminars.
Or
children.
Kids.
Where it was almost like this idea that a woman couldn't give knowledge to a guy for it to be useful, and a huge shift in the mentality to go, well, if someone's world class like Fionn is, her jiu-jitsu techniques are going to work just as well, if not better, because she's having to do it against girls who are bigger and guys in training who are bigger than her all the time. Those techniques are going to be just as valid and just as useful as techniques that you'd learn from a guy. Absolutely.
I mean, something that I would love to see is more women just in gyms teaching. I think this is something I find very frustrating. It's like, and I think there are some fantastic women, and it's like, if you want to, there are brown or black belt women in a gym just teaching kids or just teaching women. And it's like, if you want to, like, why are they got their black belt before he did and he's got a class. And I think it's not like intentional, but it is sexist because, again, as you say, she's had to fight bigger people constantly and has probably gone out and done really, really well, but she's still just teaching women. And yes, she should definitely be teaching a women's class, but she should also be given the, not kudos, but given the responsibility and the honor of giving her gifts to everyone. And I think that is, I don't see that often enough.
And that's how you change the mentality of men. When they are more, when they accept the fact that, yes, I can learn from a woman and I respect her game, then that's how you shift the mentality. Yeah. I mean, we were talking to a sports psychologist about ways, because there are many gyms still in England that don't have enough women, and they want to attract women. And what they do to do that is they offer free classes for women. Do you want to? Well,
something's free, it's not really valuable. And also,
it's quite weird.
I think we actually held one free event before COVID. And it was an intro, it was for everyone, and it had kickboxing and it had BJJ and it had some psychology stuff. It was like, it's like something that we're thinking about doing more of, but it was free. And I think that was our biggest mistake.
Yeah.
Because people don't value, and this is just psychology, you don't value something if it's free. And also, you need people to commit. You need them to be like, no, people just value money, and it's like, if it costs me something, I will treat it in a different way. If it's free, I just won't turn up. Or it also attracts like different people maybe who are a bit more like less committed. But
so yeah, we set that up. My previous point. So this sports psychologist, she said, you need to have women in leadership positions. You need to have women. You need to have women that are the role models for other women to come in. So make space for women.
This is the interesting thing I hear a lot, is that people are like, oh, we'll make space. Like, oh, well, when more women want to do it, we will open our doors more and we will make more of an effort. And I just think that that's such a... The only women who will get through the door will be people who, certain type of women who are like... I mean, I started jiu-jitsu, my dad's a black belt, and I had all of his... I felt very safe when I was at the gym. I felt very, like...
Protected.
Very protected. Just in, like, I mean, there's, like, 40 guys here. I was... it was in my early 20s, and I was like, never been in a space which was this male dominated before. And I think that a lot of the women I talked to who started, either their boyfriend did it, or they had there was a really good women's class that was there, or there was a female black belt who they kind of saw and were like, oh yeah, she's again, like, you were saying, female being a role model. But I think it's not about being like, oh, we'll make space when women are here. It's like, no, make space and women will fill it. And I think that's something that, again, with our open mats, we're like, let's make space. And it's taken us so little to be able to get girls to come. It's just we say it's on, and they're like, great, I'll be there. And I think that's the whole thing. It's like with the Joanna's event for women, it's time. It really feels like it's like, right, okay, let's just get this going. Like, let's make women more. I mean, half the girls that are open mats are white belts, which means that, like, at our last event, we had, 4 brown belts, 4 or 5 purples, like 10, 12 blues, and then about 25 white belts were there. And it's like, wow, all of you guys might be black belts one day. Like, that is, and they were all a lot of them were like, I have never seen a brown belt or a black belt girl before. Never seen them. Like, not exposed to them. And I think that is another amazing thing, that women in leadership positions make such a difference.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, I want to talk more in a little bit about kind of getting more women training in certain gyms that struggle with that. But I definitely say that the gyms that are most successful when it comes to having a lot of women do have women in leadership roles. I remember Yaz Wilson when she was doing her stuff at RGA and the RGA women's team blew up, or, Sam, who when she was teaching at Fight Zone, and they have a big women's team there. And it seems that you need to have a high grade, at the time, brown belt was fine. That was the highest grade that women were. But now you need a black belt women in those positions to say, I imagine that if you walk into a gym and you see a couple of blue belt women, maybe one purple belt woman, and all of the brown and black belts are guys, you go, well, actually, that's not me. You can't see yourself in that position because you don't have an example. Whereas if you walk into a gym and see a black belt woman, you go, okay, well, I can become that. I can get there.
Absolutely.
So all of the gyms that seem to have very, very big, very strong women's teams seem, have that strong female lead. But when you were talking about that, and I was thinking about that, it made me think about retention, and actually how obviously retention in jiu-jitsu is such an important thing, and how you said, 25 white belts, 15 years, if they all keep training, there'll be 25, even if there's none others, that's a lot of women black belts in the UK. But obviously retention's such a massive issue that a very small proportion of people who start get to black belt, and the only reason you don't get the black belt is because you quit. There's basically no other way that you can't get a black belt. As long as you keep on showing up, you'll get it at one point. And it makes me feel almost that it's more like, if you are a woman and you're training jiu-jitsu, it's more important for you to keep training than a guy, because we don't need more guys training. It's so male dominated, and especially in the black belt level. Yeah, of course, we want more people training, regardless of gender or sex. But I feel like if you're a woman, it's almost more important, because you're relying on that person making it through the black belt to become the leaders in 5 or 10 years' time.
Absolutely. And giving them that, like, again, it's like making them feel appreciated in that space by giving them that responsibility of teaching. I think that's so... I think you're so right.
And also having a few rules in place, I think. After the recent events, you have to make sure that your gym is a safe space for women. So if there is any chance that anyone would do something to this woman, you as an owner, as an instructor, you need to have some procedures in place.
Well, you know, let's get onto this, because I feel like we needed to talk about this, and I know that a lot of the people who I spoke to, that, you know, when I said that I was coming on, that you guys were coming on the podcast, this is a big topic in jiu-jitsu at the moment. Obviously, sort of jiu-jitsu had its Me Too movement in summer last year. I remember when it broke, because it was the day that I had my shoulder surgery, and I was up at night, and Sam posted this thing about Jackson. And well, it was happening a little bit beforehand with the stuff about Marcelo Concalves and fight sport guys, and obviously that motivated Sam to talk about Jackson, and then this massive thing happened, and it really did feel like jiu-jitsu was having its Me Too moment. Well,
jiu-jitsu had and it is having, and we don't see it. Yeah. All right, there are cases that this is happening now. Our problem was that, as much as it's great that some, you know, came out and said, you know, shared her story, it was just because she was a black belt that her story was heard. If Sam was a white belt at the time when she shared her story would be shut down.
Do you believe that?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The amount of women I know who've had, some of the stuff that he did was absolutely appalling. But a lot of the women who I've met, there was a girl at my gym. I now train in Bristol, at Pedro Bessa, and there was a girl there. She doesn't train there anymore, but she said, "Oh yeah, he followed me home. Oh yeah, he messaged me." And I was like, "What? How is this? You know?" It's like, she's like, "Oh no, I never told. Why would I tell anyone what could be done?" And I think that's the thing. It's like, you know, the black belt community is still very tight, isn't it? You know, there are some people who, and this is actually not about being a black belt. This is about people will protect their friends. Yeah. And I think sometimes there's this thing where, oh, he would never do anything. He's lovely, or she. Oh no, they could never do that. That's not in their character. But it's like, well, actually, I think people rely on that, their knowledge of this person, when actually there are some people who do things behind closed doors in private which are not okay, and you just cannot tell. Which is really hard, because I think a lot of women will share a story with someone and then it'll be like, "Oh, don't tell anyone, it's not worth it," or "No one will believe you," or "Where's the proof?"
Or men know about other men and they say it in a joking way. Yeah, which is more infuriating.
He's just like that.
You know, he's a player.
He's just, it's like dismissed.
He's sending dick pics. That's what he does. He's known for it. I mean, what?
I mean, the Jackson Sousa thing was interesting because he had this reputation initially of being this super nice guy. I mean, like, especially, like, you talk about Jack, super nice guy, super friendly, obviously charismatic, had a big Brazilian personality. And then I heard a few years ago, maybe three or 4 years ago, I heard news to the contrary. And obviously I didn't realize to the extent that it was happening, but knew that he was not such a nice guy, and kind of looked at him in a different way after that. And you're right. I think a lot of people, they don't realize it is this cognitive dissonance where you think that you know someone, and it turned, you couldn't imagine someone doing something bad that you'd have to condemn them for. But of course, that can absolutely happen. I mean, a case that probably people might not know about in jiu-jitsu, I mean, a much lower profile or a higher profile case is the Katie Piper. You know, the woman who had acid thrown on her face. I mean, and because, it was obviously a massive thing, and she's gone to make, have an incredible career working in the entertainment industry. The guy who did that was a jiu-jitsu guy. He trained at Rogers. I trained with him. Yeah. I mean, this is something that I think a lot of people might not know about. Obviously, this is very, very old news. We're talking, it's got to be 15 years ago that this happened, and I can't remember his name. But I trained with him. I rolled with him. I believe he was a blue belt at Rogers. And you would never expect it. And it's a guy who would go on to throw acid onto this woman's face and try and ruin her life. And I think it's a important lesson to know, just because you think you know someone, you don't really know them. Especially if you only know them because they've been called to you on the mat. And I think, the other thing, of course, is that how can a man judge another man on how can they judge that person by how they treat women if they've only had interaction as them as a man. So it's like if you ask a man what they think of Jackson Susie, they go, oh, super nice guy. And you ask a woman what they think of Jackson Susie, he goes, he's a complete creep.
Yeah.
You know, but then of course the people that you would be turning to, and you know, this is a massive thing obviously that needs to be addressed on where is the safeguarding, where is the route for a woman to, because especially if, I mean, we all know how close-knit a jiu-jitsu academy is. And let's say you have 5 black belts at a jiu-jitsu academy and one of them does something inappropriate to one of the female students. Those 5 black belts are going to be best mates.
Exactly.
They're going to be brothers. They're going to be trained with each other for the last 15 years. Yeah. How do you go and then take that through? You know, where is the resources for a woman to take that to a level where something's going to be done about it?
I don't think there is a safeguarding still after so much that has been said online, and you know, there's nothing concrete there. People say, why don't you go to the police? You need to submit file on file, give evidence on evidence, and the police might not be able to do much. So,
I mean, this is. There's a lot of stuff. I think when it comes to, and this is something that I've learned, you know, and as a man, you won't understand these things unless you put in intentional effort into trying to understand them. I'm very lucky because I have a lot of close female friends that I can learn from. I think if you don't, in my opinion, it's a massive issue. One of the big problems in society, I believe, is that men feel like they can't be friends with women, and therefore they're kind of, you know, like, why would you ignore 50% of the human population, right? It's like that sort of thing. Why are you're not going to be able to learn a huge part about life. But when it comes to reporting sexual abuse or rape and stuff like that, how traumatizing that can be. I know, unfortunately, a few of my friends have gone through stuff that they had to make a decision, and guys don't say go to the police because they're genuinely trying to help, but it comes from a place of complete ignorance that they don't understand. The conviction rate is so small, the prosecution rate is so small, you know, the amount of evidence that they need. They're going to take your phone and they're going to go through all of your phone. They're going to do this. You're going to have to go in. You're going to have to go and have things done to your body that aren't going to be pretty, you know, very pleasant to you. All of these things happen, and at the end of the day, probably nothing is going to happen. Most women who go through this sort of stuff are just not going to be asked. Why would you put yourself through more trauma for no reason after you've gone through something like that? So even though I think a lot of guys will say, well, go to the police or do something like that, like, it's coming from a place of, you know, it's coming from a genuine place where they're trying to help, but they don't understand what that actually means.
Absolutely. And I think there's this classic thing of victim blaming where it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't be wearing a short skirt. Oh, why did you know? I
mean, if anyone thinks that, they're an arsehole. I mean, like, that can never come.
You're asking for it. How many times have you heard it?
But that doesn't come from a good place. There's no way that can come from a good place. Whereas you should go to the police does come from a good place.
It does. Maybe I slightly misrepresented. I mean, I meant more like it's, you know, when a guy says like, oh, don't wear it. It's coming from a safe. Be safe, you know, be safe. And it is a bit like, instead of telling women, oh, don't go outside, or go and learn martial art. It's like, oh, let's educate the men. Let's fight. Let's start education young and explain how to respect women and people who are not as strong as you and people who you intimidate. Because I think that's one of the biggest things. It's like, it's the onus is put on women. Growing up, I've always felt responsible. I went through this phase when I was about 18 or 19. I just started wearing baggy clothes. I was so fed up of getting attention for being a young girl, and I had to. That's how I dealt with it. And I feel like often it's just too much responsibility is put on women to not get attacked, rather than the potential attackers being. I don't know how you do it. I feel like there's got to be some way, but other than like education, or do you know what I mean?
You know what? I understand where you're coming from. It's difficult. I think like the majority of men, the absolutely massive, huge majority, 99% of the population, maybe I'm being optimistic, but I would hope so, would never do the sort of stuff that we're talking about to a woman. I understand the whole, when a guy tries to help a woman be safe, again, it's coming from a genuine place. They just don't know any better. And the whole, like, educate the boys, teach the boys, stop guys from, like, guys know that they shouldn't rape women.
Right.
They like when it comes to that, I think that when you're talking about education, it's something much deeper. This is just my opinion. It's not as simple as you should look for consent and you shouldn't harass a woman after she says, and no means no and stuff like that. Everyone knows that.
That's basics.
That everyone knows that.
I
mean, if
when you're 3, you learn that no means no.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
When did we go wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. So you don't stop killers by teaching people not to kill. You know that already. I think it comes down to, and that's why it's not so easy. You can't just put out a class to stop sexual abuse and harassment and rape and stuff like that. But it's a real cultural shift that needs to be happened, and there needs to be a deeper empathy from men, and the relationship between the two genders needs to be a lot more a lot more symbiotic, where you're not seeing you versus them. And I feel like it's so important to spend time around women in a platonic way, where you're not only, I saw something recently it was a guy, sort of a men's space sort of thing, and they do end up being a lot of the time they end up being quite right wing and anti women in general, which is a shame, because I find masculinity as a topic really interesting and really fascinating, and something that I'm always trying to learn about to better understand myself. But saying you shouldn't talk to a woman unless they're your sister, mother, or wife, and I'm like, this is the craziest shit. Yeah, literally.
What?
I mean, this is actually stuff
What?
but this is the culture that women are actually against.
Sorry, what's this again?
This is someone that I saw, and I could not believe it, but this is true, that someone who considers himself sort of a teacher, an educator of men and masculinity, and that a man shouldn't talk to a woman unless he's essentially related or their partner.
What was his reasoning?
I have I did not even. I mean, once you see that, I go, there's no reason that you could tell me here that would make any sense to me.
No.
But it's, if when a man sees, I mean, I could imagine what the reasoning is. If a man sees a woman as purely a partner, a romantic partner, or a sexual partner, then you are viewing a human being as a absolutely tiny aspect of what that relationship can be. And I think that's the problem with a lot of guys, is that they do only view women as sexual objects or humans to have a romantic relationship with, and they cannot fathom anything outside of that. And I think that's the problem. I think understanding that there is so much for you to gain as a man by having women around you, by being able to look at, go with your problems and get a completely different side of the coin, or just kind of have empathy for the other 50% of the population. So I think it's a really difficult subject. I think the whole, I get it. I get the whole stop telling women how to be safe, start telling guys not to rape people, but it's not as simple as that. They know not to do it already. It goes much deeper than that, and I don't have an answer for it.
No, I think you're right. I think it is a cultural problem. I mean, it's a patriarchal issue. It's like it is so entrenched, and it will take a long time to shift.
And we need to be raising the new generation with better, foundations for this.
I do feel like the new generation. My sister's 14, and so I'm kind of watching the new generation. I don't know how it is for her with her, but she's got loads of friends who are boys. And in fact, most of her friends are boys. I think one of the things that I find really difficult as a woman is I had an experience where I was sort of put in a position where I was treated as a stereotypical woman who was sort of left in the house and the boys went outside. But it wasn't like, oh, this is where our interests lie. It was like, the boys are going outside, and I was just like, whoa, I haven't been gendered in, I can't remember the last time. I don't know if that ever was. I wasn't brought up like that. I was brought up like, I was wrestling my dad. I would always do things which were I remember Dad used to be really proud of me. He'd be like, oh, Shanti, help me lift this thing up. And then I remember this moving man was just really impressed that I could lift this thing. And I was just like, but it was like that was but I've always had like my cheerleader being like, you can do anything. And the one time it happened to me, it wasn't that long ago, and I was just so gendered. I was like, that's the biggest insult for me, is to be seen as just a woman in this very stereotypical sense. And I do think that it's still it's everywhere. And I do think that a lot
even at workplace.
Yeah. I mean, have you had that?
Well, I had something different. The head of department when I started in a school in East London, my teaching career, and I applied for a scholarship in Royal Society of Chemistry, so I had to pass some exams, do some interviews to get the scholarship to train. And I went back and I said to him, I got the scholarship. He goes, in front of others, did you wear a short skirt? And back then, I did not say anything. I would have annihilated him now, but now, back then, I was like, no, I didn't.
No. But I thought the interesting thing I find is that when you're treated like that, you kind of start to fall into it as well. Like
it's not a joke. Like,
but it's like, you're probably going to be like, oh no, haha, that's a funny joke.
Yeah.
But actually, it's like, you're kind of being put into I think this can be said of anyone. It's like, if someone treats you like a child, you're going to probably behave like a child. If someone treats you like a sexual object, there's a chance you might adhere to that, unless you're really strong in who you are. And I think when you're younger, you've no idea what's good. I got my first job because I dressed up. Like, I got a job in a pub, and he looked me up and down and said, yeah, all right. And I was like, okay, great, cool. Like, that shouldn't be, I mean, I think that's our culture is built on that being important. I mean, I always am so surprised at women wearing stilettos to work. Like, on a level, it's like, that is so uncomfortable, and it's not for I mean, some women might say it's for them, and maybe it is, but I believe that it's just expected. And you have to you have to fit what's presented.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We were discussing about the hair, and Afro hair used to be considered completely not.
Oh, it wasn't neat.
Not neat, and not
Yeah, it wasn't
dressed up enough.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I mean, I've spoken to just girls with curly hair, and they straighten their hair to go to work. It's just, but anyway, I think that's another. I think that's like standards within women's own, like, not standards, because it's not standard. It's like it's a strange concept about tidiness.
Yeah, we're talking about stereotypes, and connecting it back to women who fight and women who grapple. Do you feel like having, obviously, anyone who does jiu-jitsu, you don't just do it once a week and it's like a hobby that you go to once a week. When you do jiu-jitsu, it becomes a big part of your life. There are very few people who are able to do it without it becoming a part of their identity. Have you found that doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and having that as part of your identity has allowed you to feel like, I have broken out of the regular stereotype of a woman, like, I'm doing something that a guy will not regularly expect me to be able to do, and I'm doing it 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times a week?
I think so, but it's less about the martial art, and it's more about being seen as an equal on the mat, and having guys at the end of the roll being like, that was fucking fantastic, I loved it. And you're like, yes. And it's like, it's a physical thing. It's the epitome of the difference between the sexes, your physicality.
Yeah.
Men have 30% more muscle mass than women, just, if you weigh the same.
Yeah.
So for me personally, it's being in a room full of guys and being able to hold my own. And that's just by being around a lot of men. And getting strong. There's something very powerful about, and everyone should get strong, but women stereotypically aren't. They're not encouraged to do exercise, and they're allowed, like, it's not part of. I mean, guys sort of, you should go and do lots of exercise. You should play football. That has its own issues, because no person should feel like they have to do anything. But women have the opposite, where it's like girls go and chat in the cafe or something. And I was never a person who was very good at that. So finding a sport which was like physical and really challenged my strength and got me into weight training, which I never would have seen myself do. I think that is, for me, that's what it's done.
Well, yeah. And what you said was perfect. Being able to, like, being respected in the gym from, you know, in the place that you go every day from men that are same boat as you or lower than you. It's amazing. I mean, you do have the comments that you're very strong for a woman.
Oh yeah, you're very strong.
But yeah, it's done a lot.
But I think it's like being around guys who see you for a person.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've got lots of guy friends who see me for who I am as a person, but every day I encounter guys who don't. And I think that being in a room full of guys who will see you, they see you, is so.
And also there's nothing sexual.
No.
That's what is the best. I mean, we say that. I'm going to caveat it in a moment. But there's nothing sexual about jiu-jitsu. I remember a friend of mine came to watch and she was like, Marina, that is too close. That is, oh my God, Marina, what are you doing? And there's nothing sexual. Like, you have the odd people that trying to hit on the new girls that come. I've seen that. But generally, it's not sexualized sport. And that's why I don't like when I see female athletes and they're sexualized in the comment sections. You're like, I mean, Fionn, she was showing a technique and someone said something about how, you know, her ass. And I'm like, how? Yeah. How? Why?
Because it's that degrading, and it just takes it down. You're like, oh no, don't take it there. Because I think that's the thing that's always for women is like being sexualized is just. Some people, you know, do really well out of it. Like, you know, there are loads of women who make loads of money being sexual objects, and in a way they're playing the game and kind of good on them. Like, you know, that's what culture expects of them, as long as they're doing it in a way that is not sort of morally horrible. Do you know what I mean? As long as they're looking after the mental health, because I don't believe that being a sexual object, I think that's a hard thing to do and not, you know, have other issues. I don't know.
Well, you know, talking about that it's a controversial topic, and I know it is amongst women as well, which is a lot, you know, women have the ability, like women in general, especially if they're athletic and they're in good shape, are going to be sexualized by men. That's just part of human nature, unfortunately. And it's seen as a negative. But then some women will go, well, look, this is going to happen to me anyway. Better make some money out of it. And these days, with, you know, you can have OnlyFans or stuff like that, where you can really make some proper money out of it. And a lot of fighters are turning to that and making more, like 10 times more money than they ever did from fighting. But I, you know, even before this time of OnlyFans and being able to sort of monetize it so directly, there's this controversial topic about sexualizing women BJJ athletes. You know, women BJJ athletes using their sexuality in advertising or to gain a following and stuff like that. You know, is it a bad thing?
Well, we need to go back
for the long game.
Yeah, we need to go one step and realize, why does this BJJ athlete feel the need to do sexy advertisements? Is it that the pay is not the same as their male counterparts? Is it that, you know, there's not much platform for her to, you know, is there no exposure for her? So you need to see this angle. We do understand that there's pay gap, right? We do understand. We've talked to Tiffany, a very, very, very successful athlete, and she said that I've been fighting for how many years? Kickboxer. I've been fighting for 10 years. If I go and have a naked photo shoot, I will have way more attention than all of the titles that I have. But she says that fundamentally, I'm not going to do it because that puts the pressure on the new athletes that are coming, the new wave that sees that, oh, this is the way that I'm going to get there. So it's not a right or wrong thing. I mean, what do you think? I think
for any woman who does it, I think that I have no judgment for that, because you know, if you're an athlete, you need to earn a living, you know, and being an athlete and earning a living is hard, like, you know. But again, it's not the long game. It's got, you know, if no one did it, then it wouldn't be a problem. But I think the new people coming up see it's working, see it's happening. It's like role models again. It's like, oh, they're doing it and they're really successful. I better crack on and, get them a bikini. And I think it's a shame because I think what Tiffany was saying as well is that it undervalues your worth and your technical ability as a fighter. It's like, well, why are you following me? Because I've got my boobs out, or is it because I just had a massive, amazing fight and I knocked this girl out?
Yeah.
And it takes away from what your passion is and what you're actually doing. But it's very difficult. I think it's very nuanced because in this world, it works. It's how you can earn some money. So it's but short term.
Yeah. It is a difficult topic because it's like part of you doesn't want to see, like you said, obviously it's a fancy world that's never going to happen. But like part of you doesn't want to see any athlete.
Having to
have it but I mean, I feel like maybe some of them just want to, but you don't want to see it because it detracts from their skill. But then at the same time, you feel like anyone should be able to do whatever they want to do. If they want to make $100,000 a month on OnlyFans, then they should be able to. I just kind of, when you're talking about a comment about Fion's arse in a video of her teaching an armbar, you go, look guys, just if they're in a picture, if they've got their arse out on purpose to look sexy, say they have a nice ass there, and if they're showing a jiu-jitsu technique, don't do it there.
Context.
Exactly. Like if someone is quite obviously kind of leveraging their sexuality, then say all your crude comments there. And if someone's trying to be taken serious and being treated like, just don't, that's kind of what I'm thinking. But it is a tricky subject.
It's very tricky.
What's your point of view?
That is my point of view. Look, I think... Look, I don't want to tell anyone what they should and shouldn't do. No. I mean, if I feel like it's sort of almost irrelevant because it's purely hypothetical. You'll never have someone. You'll have some women really like the attention, and maybe that's something that's a problem with their self-esteem, or it's a problem with the culture that we grow up where like they're going to be valued most for how they look physically. So it's sort of almost completely hypothetical that a woman wouldn't leverage their physical appearance if they were able to do so. But I think and it should be up to them if they want to, but I think like when they're trying to be taken seriously they should be.
That's the problem. It can undervalue, undermine. That's the word I've been trying to think
of. Anyway, I know we kind of went off track, but I feel like there was a bit more for us to talk about. I mean, bringing the mood straight back down after talking about some OnlyFans, which is back to the sort of the safeguarding issue that there is in jiu-jitsu, and it is like a topic that we kind of spoke about and moved off of. But I kind of wanted to get some, because obviously this is something I know that you girls were really on the forefront of the recent Jiu-Jitsu's Me Too, and kind of exposing it and then trying to get that conversation going about what can be done about it. It's pointless to just expose something without actually looking at practical ways that stuff can be done. What should gyms be doing? Obviously, we're talking about this issue of a woman being able to, if she feels uncomfortable, go into someone, whether that's... And, I was thinking about it when all of this was happening. Is it that a gym needs to have a line of communication where it's going to be taken seriously, or is it an even case where there needs to be an outside organization
that's what we were saying, because sometimes it's the leadership. So who do you
go to?
Who do you go
boss?
to? If it's the boss,
No, I think a third party. I mean, again, when I don't know if I'm qualified to say to sort of give advice, but it feels like a third party because they don't have an opinion. Like they can be completely outside, and they won't come in and be like, oh, but it's my mate John. They'll be like, oh, let's deal with this from a subjective point of view where I can actually make a judgment which isn't biased.
In a company. All right. If you look at the structure of a company, if you have an HR, you've got an HR, you've got someone that deals with these allegations. There should be something similar in jiu-jitsu, and more so because it involves so much, physical exchanges.
I mean, the opportunity for abuse is there.
Exactly.
Because obviously there's the issue of there being a hierarchy that sometimes is taken a little bit too seriously, where black belts are worshipped as leaders and almost in a cult-like way. There's physical contact where if someone wants to, it can be very subtle. The line between grappling with someone and perhaps doing something that passes the line can be, very, very subtle and very, very hard to judge or very hard to see. It's tough. And there's definitely opportunity there for it to happen. So, I'm thinking with this, is it something like the UK BJJ needs to, because you're also thinking, let's say there's a organization, let's say, for example, for hypothetical sense, that you as women who fight have or as a resource where a woman can put in a complaint or can put in some sort of start a process where you're going to look into it, but then you have no jurisdiction over X and Y gym.
You can do, what's it called, when you basically make everyone aware and then people make their own decision. So I think we were talking to someone about the Jackson Sousa thing, and he said, well, no one's going to, it's an alleged offence. He's got some alleged offences. No one's going to take it to court because, we were talking about how horribly difficult it is, to go through that process. And there are a myriad of reasons why a woman would not want to go through that. And I totally respect that. And, I don't know if I would in the same position. But it's it's like it's the community court. It's what's it called? It's like when everyone, you make people aware, and then it's like, it just becomes knowledge that this person is not to be trusted. And I just don't know if that's ideal, but
there is some danger there. There is the danger of being judged by in the court of public opinion.
That's the one.
I'm not going to go into details about the case specifically, but I'm sure you ladies are aware of a alleged accusation that there was a back and forth. The UK BJJ did get involved, and it was from what I saw following the back and forth, it's gone quite quiet now, that actually maybe it was a false allegation, just really nuanced. And the individual involved was judged in the court of public opinion. And I think in the unique thing about the Jackson Sousa case is how the volume.
Yeah, the
because of his access to, because of his position in the community, because of his rank, because of who he was, he was able to have access through seminars, through affiliates, to multiple different gyms around the country. He was teaching in London. He'd message people to come and train. He had his own gym. He was able to basically affect so many people that you could pretty much rely on the court of public opinion, because this was, a 20 girls going to lie about this. It's very unlikely. Yeah. But then if you have something I feel like you can't rely on the court of public opinion to demonize someone, because there's a huge possibility of abuse where, for whatever reason, and I know that this is an argument that is used by guys all the time, which is, well, maybe they're lying. And I do understand that false accusations of this type are very rare, but there's still a possibility, and they do happen. Yeah. So it's an awkward situation where I feel like an organization, obviously we do have a governing body, but not every gym has to be associated with the UK BJJ.
And if they're not, the UK BJJ cannot do anything about it.
Exactly.
So you're it's Wild West.
Well, that's that's possibly the problem, that maybe it's that there needs to be a third party organization that is not, you don't pay to be a member of, but kind of you opt in to be a part of this, and then a woman knows that this gym is, at the very least, this gym is being supported, they have that connection with this other organization. I don't know.
No, I think that because I was just listening to you, I was just thinking that it's instead of it being like, these ones are bad, or let's demonize this person on these grounds, it's like, no, let's point out who's trustworthy, who is good, who has safeguarding policies. These places are places where you can trust that you'll be looked after, and we endorse them.
Yeah.
We give you that, and if there's any problems, you come to us, and we will then deal with it.
Exactly.
I think that makes the most sense, because I do think otherwise it just becomes like you're just chasing.
Yeah.
And the best way for gyms, like moving forward, is to have very clear procedures in place. And then,
I think stuff like, it's like little things that instructors can do, like saying, to when a new female student arrives, be like, if there's ever any problem, please know that, if it's a sexual something does something sexual which is really not invited, not consensual, or if someone says something really that makes you really uncomfortable, please come and tell me, and making it very clear that you are there to listen. Because I think a lot of people might say, oh, of course they can come and talk to me, that's totally fine, yeah, of course my door's always open. But I think I'd like to be told that. I'd like someone to say, you can come and tell me. And obviously,
but also the problem there is that what if it's your best mate?
Yeah.
I mean, what if it's the instructor that's got,
exactly. So
absolutely.
it needs to be.
But I do agree that I think it's important for an instructor to really, obviously, if the instructor is a piece of shit who would do something really bad, then
probably
what are you going to do about it? Yeah, exactly. But if they're not, then they really need to go out of their way to make all the women there. And I think that's something, I don't own a gym currently. I'm working on it. And I've taught at a gym before. And, over the past year and a little bit longer, and kind of with all of this stuff that's gone down, it really made me think about like what I didn't do, what I wish I did do, where someone came to me and complained about something. And I really should have, like, instead of going, okay, well, if it happens again or if it gets worse, then tell me about it. And, that's not because I was protecting them. That wasn't because they were like my mate. That was just going back to that whole thing of, it's a bit awkward sometimes to kind of go, maybe watch where you're putting your hands when you're doing this and stuff like that. But actually, being able to, when someone joins, say, look, this is the procedure. You can send me an email if you want on this email address, or you can come, or you can write something. You can set anonymously if you want to. You can say, you can put it with your name, and like something will be done about it. Like there will be a resolution. Whether you're happy with that resolution, that's another thing that can go through. But like, I feel like a woman would. I'm guessing that women would feel a lot safer
if there's
procedures. If that was the case,
and they feel like
like it's something that the instructors already thought about.
Yeah, and they're feeling like that like their interests are being they're physically being looked after. Their well-being is being considered in a space where they're the only girl. I mean, being a minority in any situation could be really daunting. I mean, guys coming in when there's just girls, it's like what it is a thing, but I think that for me, having an instructor who does that, but I also think that having an outside body, because an instructor, as you say, might say that, but then be like, not actually do anything because it's their mate, and they're like, oh,
I've
they're
trained
great.
them for so many years.
We've always gotten on so well. I'm sure it's fine. Maybe she made it up. But having a third party, and then so you tell your instructor and you tell the third party, which will then follow it up. So I think it's like it's taking off the onus off of you, where you are definitely, if you're the victim, you can't be gaslit.
Yeah.
You can't be ignored. And, then if this third party is like, well, they're not really doing anything, these are what we suggest. One of them might be leave the gym. I don't know what else actually they could suggest. But do you know what I mean? Like having very clear instructions. And there's this great trauma-informed coaching that we've spoken to off the zone, who've recently put up some fantastic resources about what to do. Basically, if you feel there's sexual assault, and I think it is so much about sharing what's available. If I something like that happened to me, the only reason I know what to do is because we run Women Who Fight, and because of the research. And I think a lot of women wouldn't know where to go.
Just a quick one. Just because you said about you talked about Off the Zone, they did. We reposted this. They did say, please send links of your country. So they're asking now for people to
to
share resources with them, so that they have a global database, a directory. So that's important to mention.
That's really good.
Yeah. I think that's it does seem like that's the best way to go, isn't it? With some side.
I mean, third party is crucial, so that they don't know these people, because the community, if you go in deeper into who are the founders, who started jiu-jitsu, they have really strong links. So if God forbid someone talked about them, where would you be in that?
I mean, like a great example is I don't want to talk about this too much longer. We've got something slightly more positive, but it's an important. I think it's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah.
But the fight sport stuff, and Marcella, funnily enough, I mean, unfortunately, I seem to have had connections with most of the bad people, but I trained with Marcelo a few years back. My grandparents live out in Naples, which is where he had his gym. And it was the closest gym. It was a fight sports gym. It's a good gym. And I went and trained there, and I trained with him. And again, super cool guy. Super cool guy to me.
Yeah.
Obviously, a piece of shit. And you know, most worryingly, was probably around the same time that it was happening the whole time. So you really do never know.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, when that came out, I saw his mugshot probably 6 months later. I was like, what the fuck? I was training with this guy 6 months ago.
Wow.
Not a clue in the world.
No.
You know, I didn't have anything. I didn't know him personally before that. I just went to train, and he was the black belt there, and that's who I trained with. And then I saw his mugshot, and then obviously saw the story, and then the young lady that it happened to came out. I believe again she kind of brought the story back up and actually gave her full, you know, which is like a really horrific and a great example of what can happen when someone's really trusted, like you can those connections you can make. But he was protected by the, you know, he was deep in the fight sport community, and he was protected by guys who are very, very highly regarded, very, very highly respected in the community. And I know that a lot of people, kind of some morally good people have left their gym that was connected with fight sports because of the way that it was handled, where he was kind of naughty boy, almost like a little bit like the sort of the Catholic Church sort of situation. I mean, don't want to get too but like the same sort of situation where, okay, we'll take him out the gym, and you know, maybe he does this here, and it almost feels a little bit like that, where it's very, very it's very, very close knit, and you sort of deal with the problem on the surface, and then kind of
wait until it's gone down and it's forgotten.
And that's like a bad situation. That's not even like, oh, something small, like something bad happened, and then that was his sort of punishment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was super bad. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that we need to also discuss, not nice, but it has to be said. You know, in gyms there are little children, right? Kids, underage kids. Now, I'm a teacher. To be able to work in a school, I need to be doing my DBS check every year. All right, it needs to be renewed. How much of these is completed by instructors in the gym?
You're teaching children,
and you're touching. I'm not touching anyone in my workplace.
Yeah, like jiu-jitsu. The closeness of jiu-jitsu and the like, it's impossible to teach jiu-jitsu without that closeness. It's something that, like you said, as a teacher who is trained to be a teacher, who's done all of the checks, you are not allowed to put any physical contact
at all.
Whereas, and I think you're absolutely right. It's a good question to ask.
Or share the same toilets.
Yeah.
And share the same changing rooms. I would never share a same toilet as a student.
Yeah.
Ever. That's like a no. In jiu-jitsu gyms, it's out of like when you share the same changing rooms and bathrooms.
I mean, thankfully, I have not heard of any examples of what could go wrong there going wrong. Certainly off the top of my head. But you're absolutely right. You know, it's another issue that you would hate to be talking about it for the first time because something has happened. These protections need to be in place beforehand.
I think they do, and DBS isn't hard to do. Like, it's actually quite
it has to be a must in any gym.
I think that should actually, because that's not a structural change. That doesn't require a third party.
That requires nothing.
That requires you applying. And I had to have a DBS for a bit when I taught kids, and it was so easy. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I remember you telling me that you were like tapping the children, like when they went out, to say on the shoulder and being like, off you go, and then you were told off.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do not touch.
But they're so strict. It's like you can't touch them.
Yeah, but that's the difference between, you know, a very, very structured approach through the school system and and I think that's part of the problem. That is why there's so much scope for abuse in jiu-jitsu, because it's so laid back, it's so informal, there's no regulations, there's no rules, and it's, you know, it always, it is a lot of grooming. It's stay behind after class, I'll show you a few more techniques, I'll come in early, or, you know, come over and watch the fight. You know, that's the sort of stuff that you hear with a lot of these cases, which it all oh, I'm the special student, and, you know. Yeah. Scary stuff.
It's really scary.
Anyway, we've covered the important part. Let's talk some more.
Yeah, let's lighten it up, please.
Okay, women, something that I said that I wanted to get back onto and talking about is getting more women into jiu-jitsu. What is the stuff? So a few people asked me this question: what do gyms need to do, apart from the safeguarding stuff, to make a woman feel safe? But also just to get them into the sport, to get them enjoying it, to make them feel comfortable. The sort of, you're never going to get the environment, you're never going to get the vibe that you girls manage to create in these women open mats. You're just never going to be able to get it in a mixed gym. But how can you get women? What is the closest that a mixed gym environment can get to? What are the sort of things that they need to be doing?
Two things that I immediately think of are women's classes, which we talked about before, and having a female role model.
Explaining why women's classes. For the people that are like, why do we need women's classes?
I started twice. I started in Brighton for 6 months, and I started again at Carlson's when I moved back to London. And I started in a women's class with a female black belt teacher. And I felt so... It's very, if I remember the first few times I rolled with a guy, I was like, and I felt probably guys are the same when they first roll with a girl. They'll be like, oh God, I don't want to put my hand on the wrong place. You know, definitely cupped a few balls in my time. When you're like, oops, shit, sorry.
That's the soundbite for the episode.
Also, if anyone who's listening does anything like that, cup something
you just
that
have
you should
to say
just
sorry.
say oops. So just say it straight away. Oops. Sorry.
You have to say it like that though.
Make it it's like the school. If you by accident touch a kid, you're like, oops. I shouldn't have. I'm really sorry.
Exactly the same thing.
Make it clear.
Okay.
And it's also the same if a guy, sort of puts his hand on a girl's boob. If you just say, oh my God, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I won't even blink. I don't care. But if a guy puts it there and then doesn't acknowledge it, I'm like,
Yeah.
Probably was an accident. Most likely it was.
But you're thinking about it. It makes sense.
It helps. What was I talking about?
The women's classes.
Okay, thanks. But I think for me, starting in a women's class and just not having to think about that, getting some techniques down and feeling safe again, because there's a black belt and a black belt woman, and being like, oh, you're black belt. Or, oh, that could be my projection. And meeting other women in that environment. There's something about rolling with someone that I'm sure everyone has, which breaks down so many barriers. It is beautiful. I love it. And rolling with women and then laughing and then crying, or maybe, and just having this experience with all this group of women who were all really involved in the same thing immediately creates a sense of community. It did for me, where you'd come in, and when I started going to the mixed classes, which was quite quickly, I'd be like, oh, you, hey, yeah, I know you. Can we do this together? Okay, great. And then later on you talk about it and you're going, oh, I rolled with this guy and it was really great. Oh, this thing happened. It immediately creates a community for women where they can support each other in a male-dominated environment. And I don't feel like I need that anymore. And I don't need it. It'd be quite nice. We don't have a women's class where I train. But I don't need it. But I really felt like that for me was a huge boon when I started.
Okay, one question on that. Interesting follow-up question. Genuinely curious. Obviously the ideal situation is you have a high level, a brown or a black belt woman teaching your women's only class. Now, let's say there are no women instructors. There is no, the resources just aren't there. A male teaching a women's only class, yes or no?
Yes. I think
if there's nothing else,
absolutely.
Yes.
But I think it's creating a space where you're training with women, which is for women. But I also wonder, if ideally, maybe you could outsource and maybe go to another gym where there's a female, even a purple belt or even a blue belt for beginners. Yeah. Like it's about getting girls coming in as white belts, and then when they're 6 months in, they can easily transition to mixed classes and feel like they know more, and then they go up together. They all get better together. I would, if you can't outsource, then it has to be a guy, but it has to be the right kind of guy who really pushes it. I think anyone leading any new class, whether it's kids or women's, a class which is not the normal mixed class, you need to really put in a lot of effort. You have to commit a lot of time. So it also has to be someone who really
enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, and they really want this to happen, and they have to put it on even when there's only 2 girls, because sometimes there are two girls or one girl, and then you have to be like, right, okay, let's still make this really great so that you'll come back. Because I often as well, you know, I think it's fairly common if you're like a brown belt girl and you've got a competition coming up, it's not very likely you're going to go to the women's only class when there's 5 white belt girls training. But it's like, as long as that space is always available, I think it will grow. And I think sometimes it goes through, obviously, everything.
Phases.
There's phases where people go and people then don't, because work comes up, life happens. But as long as it's always there as well.
Yeah. You know,
Fight Zone has started a women's team very recently, and they are smashing it. I don't know what is going on. They've
got some really high level girls
smashing it, and it's amazing. And I expect that their women's classes are going to become even like more packed, because you see. You know, you see the role models there, you see what you want to achieve, and you want to go. I mean, women's classes are, think of it as the people that you're on the same journey, and you don't want to know how to do stuff. When I started, I was like, do I keep my belly piercing? I asked someone in the gym, in the women's classes, do I keep it on? Or do you remember Sarah? Like she made sure that we are all aware of, you know, is this technique not going to work? Try it. Go hard. It wasn't a gentle class. Do you remember?
Yeah. And I remember rolling with her and just being like, holy shit. Like being absolutely annihilated and feeling how strong she was. Because obviously if you're rolling with a guy, you're like, oh, but he's a guy. He's got more muscle mass anyway, blah, blah, blah. But rolling with her, I was like, oh no, she's a tank. And I could be a tank too.
Yeah.
You know?
I think what it seems from my experience is that, and kind of what you're also kind of alluding to here, is the momentum with the women, and what you're talking about with Fight Zone is because they have this high level comp team, not just a women's team, but like women who are smashing it internationally and killing it. That's going to attract even more women. And I guess the issue is getting that ball rolling. You know, like I said. I mean, I put something out years ago, and it was really interesting. And in this huge thread on Facebook, and I just asked, look,
where on Facebook?
It was, I think it was just on my page. It wasn't on the Underground or anything like that. It was just on mine. And I said it was. So basically at Mill Hill, I ran the no-gi. So I had my own no-gi program, and people could join the gi, the no-gi, or they could do both. And I had 0 women, 0 in my no-gi program. I probably had...
Did you go with the onesies?
I mean... It was Singlet Thursdays.
Or was it?
It was actually Singlet
Lumberjack
Thursdays.
Fridays.
that didn't exist at the time. Right?
Are you still wondering why women didn't go?
Do you know what? I'm going to tell you something.
Right.
I'm going to give you some education. Okay.
Go on.
My singlets, women love them.
I know. I love them.
They
too.
love them
I
because
love them too.
apparently one of my old kind of students, a friend of mine, Joe, she has bought so many of my singlets, and she says it is the best thing for women to wear under their gi because it keeps everything in. You're not worried about tops
Stuff
rising
riding
up,
up.
falling down. So don't knock the singlet.
No.
Don't knock the singlet. But I guess that wasn't the point. I had no women training with me for about a year, maybe even longer, about a year and a half. And I put this thing out. I'm like, because the gi classes had women training in them, not a huge amount, but they had 3, 4, 5, 6 women members. And I put this thing out like, is it a gi and no gi thing? And there was some really interesting answers, which is like maybe like some women were saying that they're a bit more intimidated because obviously. The gi, like a kimono, is one of the least flattering, body forming pieces of clothing that you can wear. When you see a load of people wearing a gi, everyone kind of looks the same. But when everyone's in like tight rash guards and shorts, the guys can look really big and it's like really sweaty, and maybe women don't like that, or they're conscious about wearing super tight stuff. There was like some really, I wish I saved it. I can go back and have a look, but there were some really interesting answers. And then Abby started training with me. And she was the only woman for probably about a year. And fair play to her, because that is tough. And then there was 2, and then there was 3. And then as soon as there was more than a couple per class, suddenly, by the time I left, there was like 10 or 11 women who were training with me. And it just like the way that the momentum built was so rapid. It was just such an interesting thing where it seems that as long as you get those first couple, they're going to be the difficult ones to get. But once you've got a few, it's just going to continue the build.
And consistent. Girls who will come every single week and be regular to the same classes, or similar classes. So for a girl coming, they can go, oh, you train on Thursdays and Saturdays and Mondays. Great. I will be there too. Yeah. And I think I think it's the consistency.
But you're, saying that, it's about that picking up that momentum and already having women on the mat. But then that goes back to the women-only classes. Like, that's how you get them in the first place. Because if they're coming into the mixed class to begin with, then you need that one person who's going to train for 6 months as the only woman on the mat. Whereas if you have women's-only classes, that's what's going to get them in.
What sense. I have seen through my years of training is that, you remember, we always had a group chat.
Yeah.
We always had a WhatsApp group where people say, "Are you attending this class? Are you going? Tonight? Is anyone training?" So that if you have some rounds in.
Yeah.
Normal rounds.
And also, I think it's that the importance, the reason why fighting women is so important. It's not just feeling like you're not the only girl training there, and it's seeing what works. I mean, we talked about this a bit earlier, but it's going, oh, this Kimura, actually, I can put it on. His arm is just, way bigger or stronger, or and going, oh, okay, so then you adjust, you learn with the girls, you can go, oh, this works, this doesn't work, and then you take it to the mixed class and then you've adjusted things and you're like, now it works against someone bigger. But I remember listening, I think it was Ashley Williams giving some advice, and he said a really good way to train is like train with people who are better, train people who are the same, and train with people who are lower. Like, you shouldn't just train with people who are better than you, because you don't get to try anything out. Like, it's very hard to, I mean, I'm sure you've got a lot to say about this, but it's like that, and that really stayed with me, because I think as a girl it's harder to find people who aren't as good as you, because if they're not as good as you, then they're probably a lot stronger.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I'll take that advice even further. I think the majority of your training should be against people that you're better than. And this is just how my training's been, just because of where I've been training and because I've been training for a long time. But I think Danaher or one of those lot came out at one point. They said 70% of your training should be people that you're smashing.
Wow.
And I 100% believe that. And you're right. When you look at women grappling through that filter, you go, man, that's tough. Because even a really good female grappler on a regular mat will not have a huge number of people that they can smash. You have to be, if you're 60 kilos and a woman, you have to be an absolute savage to be able to take out some of these guys, because you're going to be 10 times more skillful than them, but they're going to be able to hold you off with strength and explosiveness and stuff like that. So it is tough, but then it's why you see when women do break through that and they're at a position where they can beat up a lot of people, you see their game kind of just taken to the next level.
That makes so much sense.
It's really interesting.
The sports psychologist we spoke to, she said you could create jobs in your gym for women so that they are
included.
They're included and they're there and they have a say for your company. As in company, for your gym.
So when you mean jobs, you mean like reception, or
could be reception, it could be to help with running the gym, with decisions. Have another eye, have a female eye. That could be good as well.
I mean, you're assuming that this gym would have to have a level of organization where they actually have roles in the gym, which isn't many jiu-jitsu gyms. But I think it is important. I spoke to one of my old students actually, and I was talking about this gym that I'm trying to get, and I said, when I get it, you can come in and you can design the female changing room however you want, just like whatever you want to put in there, however you want it to look, because like, how the hell am I going to be able to know what a space for women looks like a good space for women? And I think that's another one that I saw really important points, because obviously I'm lucky in doing seminars. I think that I'm relatively confident in saying that I have been to more jiu-jitsu gyms in the country than anyone else.
Oh my God.
I genuinely believe that.
Have you been to Chelsea's gym Escapology?
I haven't, no.
You haven't? Oh my God.
That
All
is
right,
a gym
BCC.
made by a woman.
There you go.
Run by woman and Chris, she's got a she's Cypriot. Chris is helping her run it, and they've made this decision to go all white.
Yeah,
including the geese.
Yeah, I mean that's like art of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
That's like the whole thing.
She said she did it because she wanted it to be really clean and to be very obviously this is a clean space.
Yeah, I mean cleanliness is a hugely important one. Hugely important,
yeah.
just to running a business in general, but especially for attracting women and
also
kids.
if you want to have women, have a decent changing room
and
area,
have a decent shower.
Decent shower. It's not like this little 2x1
little
is
spout.
for you because you're not very many. Have a 2x1.
Yeah,
you know that's
and you know it's small touches that sort of like if I go into a space
and there's tampons
yeah.
Oh my God,
like by the toilet, and there's a bin by the toilet, and there's also like you know like not even like a mirror, but there's hairbands.
Yeah.
Oh my God, like these tiny little things which are just like for like you know there are these things that guys don't have to bring in.
That are super important for women,
which make a huge difference in like you know there's you know I like, for example, if you forget a tampon, you know, someone might be like, "Oh, why don't you remember it?" It's like, "Oh, I forgot."
Yeah.
There's just times when you do,
and that goes back to what I was saying about having a woman to help you run.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't know about tampons and hairbands.
I mean, I already that was already part of the plan, but that's because I kind of asked enough women what they want in a gym.
But then maybe that's also it. If a guy like you know you're going to design it, you just have to get feedback. And I think any woman who trains regularly and has been will tell you the same thing. They'll give you like a list, and it will be all of them will give a similar list.
What we do in school? What do you want to talk?
Yeah, no, go on.
What we do in schools is we have inspiring people on the walls. You can have someone like Fion on your wall.
Yeah.
There's where you're going to.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. You know, 100% is kind of making that environment feel like, you know, feminine, like women feel like they're being...
It's made for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's been made for them. But what I was going to say with like the whole, like I probably visited more gyms than I'm confident in saying. I mean, I've done probably 200 seminars in the UK. I've been to a lot of different gyms, and a crazy number of them have no changing rooms.
Atrocious.
They don't have a changing room. But this is something that obviously guys don't get. Like they get changed on the mat. Right? This is a common thing. This is a super common thing. And whenever I go to a gym, I'll say, "Where's the changing room?" They go, "No, we just get changed on the mat." And you know, for you girls, you're training at Carson Gracie or people training in big gyms where you have a lot of space. This is something that you would not even consider that there wouldn't be a women's changing room, let alone no changing rooms where they're just changing on the mat. And then obviously the women are not going to change on the mat normally. They're going to go to the toilet and change in the toilet or something like that. But I feel... So it was those 2 points, which is one, having a women's changing room. Some gyms have a change room, but they don't have a women's changing room. Or not having a changing room at all, where you have the guys coming in, and even if the women aren't having to get changed on the mat because they can go to the toilet.
Right outside.
They're just there, and guys are getting changed on the mat.
That's
happens a lot.
That is true. The first place I ever trained at, they didn't have a women's changing room, and I still had to go to the disabled loo. Yeah, and it was always really annoying because it'd just be like across the way, and then you'd have to carry all your stuff. It
just makes you feel I don't belong here. I'm just
you're not been thought of. You haven't been considered, and I think if you haven't been considered in that way, then you probably haven't been considered like in the space, like when you're rolling with a guy either. You know, it's such a psychological thing.
And the way we are now, and the growth that women have in the sport, it's unacceptable not to have designated space for women to change and designated space for women to, you know, go for toilet. It's unacceptable. However many women you have in your gym, we are at an era where it's a women's sport as well. Yeah. It's growing.
Yeah.
Few more things. I mean, we're at over, believe it or not, over 2 hours.
No.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
No, do not cut anything. It's going to be a marathon.
I'm not cutting.
It's going to be a marathon. Pause. Do your thing and then
go have a bath.
Resume.
Come back.
We'll crack on. We'll continue again tomorrow. No, a few things I wanted to ask. One, sort of what looking on the bigger picture now, as two girls in the sport and also girls who are sort of deeply involved in the women landscape in the sport, what are the sort of things that you would like to see, stuff that we haven't already spoken about, like safeguarding stuff and stuff like that? What are things that you would like to see in jiu-jitsu to move it forward for women?
Can I start to get you started?
Yes, you please do.
Women's sizing, women's apparel.
okay.
You can.
Someone mentioned this.
Need to be made in a women's shape, please.
That will not ride up.
That don't ride up to my boobs.
Do you girls make any? Do you girls have any apparel? Are you working on it?
We're working on it. We're working.
I was going to say, if anyone's going to make some female,
it's unbelievable that we have reached to so many different places and said, "Oh, gone."
Yeah, so I've been trying to find. Me and Marina are trying to just get like a rash guard that we can wear for women who fight, and just start the sort of so we can be like, this is our little team, and then hopefully we'd be able to sell them and stuff. The amount I cannot find a company in the UK that makes a rash guard that fits a woman. They do women's sizes, which are small things like this, which fit guys.
Yeah,
small men.
I've had to go to America. I found one in America that actually does a women's shape.
When you're talking about making, I mean, very few companies in the UK will be making anything. It will all be outsourced. So it doesn't surprise me that sportswear that's being made in China or usually made in Pakistan, it doesn't surprise me that they won't be having stuff that will be formed for women. But, I think one of the best things that, one of the other things that you can do is go talk to some companies and say, look, let's collaborate. Go talk to Tatami, go talk to Scramble,
That's true.
I know a few other people. If you want to ask me afterwards, and I can put you in touch with some people like who did my rash guards, Progress, and ask them, look, do you have the facilities? Because look, they already know the factories. They can talk to them. They've got direct communication with them, and say, would you be up for doing a run of rash guards for us? Talk to them.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you girls afterwards, and I'll see if I can help you out with that.
That'd be good, because the initial thing was I've been emailing. I've done that where I was like, do you do women's sizes? And I was having to try and draw it out for them and be like, this is what women's size looks like, and they'd be like, oh no, we don't. So they don't have it. They don't have it prepared. But you are right. A collaboration would like.
And when we first started, the clothing, it was so tacky. So it's either pink or it's got so much flowery
daisies
stuff
on my rash guard.
Why?
Which
Why?
Some people might like.
Yeah.
But that is
a lot of guys
niche.
wear daisies on the rash guard,
which
as well.
is fine, but there needs to be an alternative.
Yeah,
for just like basically simple, minimalist,
exactly,
but cut for women.
Yeah. So moving forward, that's important.
Number one.
That's
Women's
more
cuts.
competitions that are. For example, I'll call them out now because we've been asking.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
We have commented on so many posts with Vanessa English, with I don't know how many other women, to say, Polaris,
please do.
Why don't we do a women's teams show? There are women now, because the argument was there aren't many. So many women now. Do a bloody show. It's gonna pick numbers up.
So you want a women's squads event?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay,
and that's gonna bring fire.
Look,
fire.
I actually think that you're right. I think that women in general, their matches are really exciting because they're usually scramble more, they're lighter, there's more movement, just like the lower weights are usually quite exciting. And, they really, I mean, look at Fion's fights and her matches that she's had on all the Polarises. I think there's been discussion with Polaris about doing a women's squad event. Let me see what I can do.
Yeah, it has to be.
I'll talk to the Polaris guys on the next event.
Yeah, it's important.
And
because I'm telling you, the argument is gone now. Because the argument was there's no many.
So what I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but I will anyway. A lot of what Polaris do is not up to Polaris.
Right.
It's up to UFC Fight Pass.
Oh.
Right. So just to take a little bit of pressure potentially off of Polaris. They're essentially working for UFC Fight Pass because that's where they're getting their money to run the events. So if UFC Fight Pass say we don't think that a women's event will get good viewership, then it's out of Polaris's hands whether they're allowed to do it or not.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting.
So
and thank you for
So
clearing
let's call out
it.
UFC Fight Pass.
yeah, so that's it. You know, and you know what's going to be really interesting is I think it's Enyo is Joanna's event. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think Eddie Bravo has done a women's only event. Mm-hmm. He's done a few women's only events. Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting to see how Joanna's does. Mm-hmm. And, you know, all of these things, I think that's sort of the end goal is to have an event, you know, an event like Polaris that is able to and is supported by UFC Fight Pass and saying, you know what, guys like watching this. They want to watch this. There's enough. Because if you think about, you know, it is all about, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about women instructors and where guys need to go, you know what, they're just as good, they're just as exciting, they're just as legitimate as men are. We're going to watch this.
Mm-hmm. Moving forward, just to be fair, moving forward, it's not just about women's only shows. In a card where you have, you know, 10 guys and two girls fights, why don't we do it more equal?
I mean, do you think that the number of women's fights versus men fights, do you think that it's an accurate representation of the ratio of men to women doing the sport?
Well,
genuine question.
Hold on. To make this thing better, we need to actively work on it.
Also, thinking about, we've talked about CrossFit before being very... I totally hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting thing CrossFit has done, which is it immediately gave equal representation to men and women, even though there were less women fighting, less women competing. And it's again about role models. And it's again like, it's the long game. It's like, yes, maybe there's a less percentage of women training and at a high level than men because you go to a jiu-jitsu class and, you know, it's mostly guys. But again, it won't change unless we sort of make it change. And it will, you know, I think having that space for women where it's like, you know, if a woman is likely to get asked to go and compete on a really high level show, that's massive motivation. Like, I don't know. I mean, do you know what I mean?
I agree. And it's an important, as an organization, you know, and you could think of your organization as shaping the future of the sport. If you give more space for women to compete in your card, then more women will come to fill it in.
I mean, also because we spoke to, there's an American female only promotion,
Submission on the Shore,
Subs on the Shore, and they're constantly filling their roster. It's crazy. I mean, America is bigger, but you know, he's like, it was insane how many girls took it up.
And he was putting his own money at the start.
And he was actually didn't have a sponsor, did he? At the beginning.
At the start,
yeah, that's an interesting one. Okay, so more women on these shows. I think, like, essentially what I think it comes down to that is the viewership numbers, which I don't know. I think what you need is an event like Enyo to become really popular. You need an event to go actually, and you know, I don't know how they do that, whether they are able to, whether a show like that is able to become massive relatively in the scheme of things, to become sort of breakthrough purely on the unique selling point of it's a women's only event, and it just turns out that women only events are like way more exciting than men events are. You know, theoretically, if that happens, then it's very possible. But you need a show like that to come in.
It's a bit like Invicta.
Yeah, exactly. You need something like that to come in. And I mean, MMA and women in MMA is a really good example. And we have piggybacked, and we continue to do so, have piggybacked on the success of MMA since the beginning of jiu-jitsu. And I mean, it is the beginning of jiu-jitsu essentially, or outside of Brazil anyway. And you know, people forget, because actually when you talk about some of the biggest stars in the sport and some of the best matches, you're actually talking about the women's matches. I mean, in MMA, there were characters. It's always a character that pushes the sport to the next level. There were characters in, you know, it was Chuck Liddell, and then it was, you know, The Ultimate Fighter season 1 finale with Forrest and Stephen Bonner, and then it was Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey took the sport to the next level, and then obviously Conor McGregor took it to the level after that. But there was a time that Dana White said that he would never have women fighting in the UFC. Now they have, I believe, 4 or 5 divisions in the UFC.
Have they just added 145? That feels recent?
Yeah, 145, 135, 2, and 115.
And PFL have Harrison, is her name? And she's 155. Kayla.
Yeah.
Kayla Harrison.
Boxer.
Oh,
judo
sorry.
Judo girl.
And Clarissa Shields as well. They're heavy girls, which
Yeah.
I think is really exciting because I remember we were talking to Brittany Elkin years ago, and she is a tall woman.
Yeah.
And to get down to 145, it was insane.
She was starving.
She literally looked. She didn't look very well. And she was saying there's an argument that there aren't enough women to do it. But she's like, I know so many women. If they had that to aim for, they train, but they don't train. They know that they're not going to be able to cut weight like that. So they don't do it. And I think it's like a similar thing. It's like open up the possibilities. And maybe that doesn't work, and then maybe you close them down. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's no harm in like taking that risk, because I think that I don't doubt for a second that it wouldn't be filled.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's what grappling needs, and I think if we're going to see a women dominant show on something like Polaris, then who Fight Pass don't care. They don't care. They only care about viewership. That's all it matters. So it all comes down to that.
We're slowly making progress, because in IBJJF I've seen that Kendall was commentating. Little positions like this, so commentators,
female commentators,
female,
that is cool.
Female referee in an MMA show.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
The only thing is, sometimes I feel like you do need a big, like in an MMA fight. I don't know what you guys think.
For a referee?
Yeah, like if you're reffing like a couple of really big, strong guys, like I feel like sometimes you do need to be a big guy, just because you need to get in the way. You need to dive in the way of a punch and be like, I wouldn't
want to be an MMA referee.
No, I wouldn't.
Stick to jiu-jitsu, making funny faces. But you're right. I think, but there is a female referee in the UFC. I'm not sure if she does the men's as well, or the lightweight men's and the women. But you're right. Not just having representation across the board and having it, and which is why there are so. I think this is something that is going to improve naturally, and I think the question that you have to ask yourself, or the question that people who want to see the sport push forward, particularly for women as well, is how they can facilitate that growth that would be organic, how they can facilitate it in a more direct way, like running shows like what Joanna's doing, or I've been trying to get Sam Cook to do commentary with me on shows for years. I mean, like since I started doing commentary like 7 or 8 years ago.
Really?
I've been trying to get. I tried to get, and it just never happened in the end. But like I wanted to get her on comms for ages, because I think she'd be great at it. And hopefully I do have someone. I'm not sure who the commentary team is planning to be for Joanna's show, but I think so. You need women not just fighting, but you need them on comms team, presenting, doing interviews with people, doing stuff like doing interviews with people and like men and women, and being part of the organization of an event and running an event and being part of the creative team behind events. I think like. I think that's important. But, there are some, EBI, for example, is basically run by a woman called Megan, who's awesome. And Eddie takes all the credit, and she like does all the organization and everything, but she's great. So, okay. So women's events, women on Polaris, sorry. What else?
I think, just a general thing, talking about it, like doing this and having like people listen to like different perspectives, and just being conscious that this is a really important change, and I think is that allyship again, that sort of has become more mainstream and talked about. If you're a guy and you see, I can't remember if I'm answering the question anymore, but if you're like in a space, it's like making sure that you don't have to be an instructor to make women feel welcome. You anyone can do it, and it's everyone's responsibility to be like, you just had a really hard role. Are you okay? Did he go too hard? And did you feel like you were not in a position to stop it? Did you feel like you were in danger or whatever? Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't have to be the instructor. Ideally, it would be. And maybe not the new white belt next door.
It's almost more important that it's not the instructor. The instructor, it's almost expected. I think if you have if you're training at a gym as a new female who started jiu-jitsu and the instructor's being cool with you, that's great. But actually, if the whole gym is full of guys who are making sure that you're okay and talking respectfly, and
absolutely,
super important.
I think, and I'm being aware, because I think so often it's not guys. We said this at the beginning. It's like a lot of guys aren't aware.
Yeah.
And I think that is big to change, because as soon as a guy is aware and he understands that he has power in this situation, he has power to help or hinder, then it's like you actually have a responsibility to be involved if you see something is wrong. And if you miss something, that's not your fault. We're all conditioned to live in this culture and this sort of this way of living. So I miss stuff, it's no one's fault. But I do think it's getting involved and checking in. You don't have to like think, oh God, something happened, I've got to do something. It's like, no, just check in and say, are you okay?
How was your role?
Yeah. It looked a little bit shit, rather than you feeling alone.
All the simple stuff, like when you're rolling and you're about to hit someone, it's not the girl's expectation to stop the roll and move. Just you do it.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Self-awareness.
Yeah.
What else? Practical things. I'm trying to think. Shows. Women's classes.
So exposure. Safety.
Yeah.
Representation and clothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you might have nailed the main ones there, to be honest with you.
I think it's the main ones.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of
talking about it is important. Yeah, what you said is
well,
nail,
I think hits
the nail on the head of the nail.
Because
the nail of the head.
Yeah,
or the head on the nail.
It hits the nail on the head.
Yeah,
right.
The head, because the head on the nail
is what you hit.
Yeah, you hit the head of the nail. You really confused me there.
I think everyone gets what we're talking about. But yeah, I think you're right. And this is sort of why I want to talk about this sort of stuff. And I think it's a topic that, for me, like I like long form, like I like long podcasts. I like to talk in depth about stuff. And that's why I do this podcast basically. And, why I wanted to come and talk to you. And I think it's a weird one. It's a weird one because I don't know who's going to listen to this. Because it's sort of this divisive thing where I'm doing a podcast with the women who fight. Is this for women or is this for guys? And obviously what you want it to be is for both. But it's very hard, like you want it to be for both. And I think it is. Yeah. I think everything we've spoken about has been, this time has flown past really, really quick.
I had no idea.
We're touching on 2.5 hours now, and it does just go super quick because, you're engaged in the conversation. It's such an interesting thing, and I hope that there is. But because we're talking about women in jiu-jitsu, it's something that is almost two-sided, and you have the men on one side and the women on the other side. But I think what we've spoken about is stuff that a lot of it is aimed towards women. And talk because the women who fight thing is for women, and it's kind of what I love about it. Even though I'm not a woman, I love to see that there's this the empowerment and the education and the helping women understand what's going on with their own bodies and how their bodies and how their hormones and their emotions and psychology all works within the category of sport and particularly fighting and grappling. But then also men can listen to it and feel like they understand women a bit better.
Exactly.
And it's something that is what sort of, and we spoke about it when I came on your podcast that I about referring to myself as a feminist and that I never did and I hated the word, and which is a common reaction that most men have, and I would repel if someone mentioned the patriarchy or toxic masculinity. Even though I didn't consider myself to be a misogynist or anything like that, I would still not think that I wouldn't consider myself a feminist and all that stuff. And it took me to delve into a feminine space and a feminist space specifically to sort of just have an understanding and sort of have a bit more empathy of what's going on. And hopefully this discussion has done both, kind of been there and kind of for any women listening. My viewership percentage of my audience is very, very tiny percentage of women. You must have it on your Women Who Fight. you have the breakdown of your audience.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
I'm not actually sure.
I know what mine is.
Do you?
Yeah, because it's so bad.
Talk while I find it.
I mean, have a guess. It was really consistent for a while, and it's got even worse. Really. Guess what my percentage of male to female on my Instagram is?
Oh, I don't know.
Go on, guess. Have a guess.
Okay. Well, just based on the impression you're giving,
Okay.
I'm going to say 10% women.
Okay. That would be okay. It was 9% women, 91% men for years, and now it's 7.5% women. So
You lost one. You lost women.
I've lost women. It's got even whatever.
What are you doing wrong?
I don't know. I have no idea. But I was hoping you girls could help me out with that. So I'm thinking the majority of people that would usually listen to my podcast obviously are men, and I think that this discussion is really, really valuable for men. And I think that what we're talking about with like all men can be an ally. I think it's something that I really thought a lot about during the obviously the massive story of like the Sarah Everard. You know, think about that, and you know that discussion that kicked up, and where you don't like everyone just going, well, I'm not a rapist, so I'm fine. But like, if you just do nothing, you're not fine. You're just nothing.
No, but it's also, I think it's that thing of equal and being anti-sexist. It's not. I think the problem is if you sit by and watch, like, and so don't get involved. There's actually it's not as bad as.
No, it's not as bad.
It is unhelpful.
But it's still a thing, and kind of the way that I likened it to is like a bit of trash, a bit of rubbish on the ground. Like you can one, kick that bit of rubbish further, you're an arsehole. You can pick that rubbish up and put it in the bin, you're a good person. Or you can walk past it.
Yeah.
And by walking past it, you don't just get to be neutral, but by walking past it, you're purposefully not doing the correct thing.
You're condoning it. You're kind of saying
That's
kind
okay.
of okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, just because you're not involved with something doesn't mean that you're, and it doesn't mean that you're guilty, but it doesn't mean that you're not guilty. And I think it's important for men that basically what I'm trying to say without preaching too much, babbling too much is if you think that you're a good guy, actively do something about it. Like be an ally to women that you see on the mats. Like purposely go out of your way to make people feel welcome, because if lots of people do that, then the whole sport's going to grow.
The environment would be amazing.
And there's a little point here that you shouldn't say, oh, it could have been my mum or my sister or my girlfriend. It's just, morally correct to do it.
You mean as a reason for helping someone?
Yeah.
The idea that the only way that you can help a woman is if you imagine that there's someone that you care about is sort of ridiculous.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Like,
I mean,
you're gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, any final things from you, ladies?
I found the breakdown.
Percentages.
Okay. We have 68.8 women and 31.1% men.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
That's good percentage.
I mean,
I thought it was 1%, which is you.
It's just you.
No, we've got more.
I mean that's pretty great actually. So you've probably got 5,000 people.
That's good.
5,000 men following your Instagram.
I love this because I tell you what, they are seeing. We are very, very. We're open about periods, and we are posting about it. We're posting about menopause,
pelvic
floors, all of it, and people are watching, people are seeing, and this is great.
But I do think that a lot. It's 50 years ago. Well, people still do hide their periods, or pregnancy is still very much like there's certain things which are taboo. But I do feel like it's now becoming much more acceptable in our culture that people are educated, women are educated, and women then educate the men, and they should. I would never expect a guy to understand period pain or what it likes being hit in the boobs, because if I haven't explained it, it's like, do you know what I mean? It's like there is a responsibility for women to explain certain situations, but it's also the responsibility of the guy to then
be open to
listen to it and listening, and like kind of not questioning it and being like, oh well, that's probably okay or something.
And also, like if you're a trainer, a PT, or an instructor, and you have a woman who's saying, I'm on the low phase of my cycle, you should kind of understand what that means.
It should be part of
so
the
that you
curriculum.
Yeah, it should be part of the training
Yeah.
to be a personal trainer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
Ladies, over 2.5 hours flown by. I think that's great. I
This
feel like
has
we
been
could
a
talk.
pleasure.
We could talk for hours and hours, and there's so much. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. But thank you both very much for agreeing to come on and to chat with me. It's been a pleasure.
No, we loved it, and thank you for creating space.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
You.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Perfect.
That is it. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to follow Women Who Fight, then you can check them out on their Instagram page. The handle is @womenwhofight.co.uk. You can also check out their website, which is, you may have guessed, womenwhofight.co.uk. You can also follow either of the ladies on their own personal Instagram pages. For Shanti, it is @Shanti Gorton, and for Marina, it is @_Mavrou_. They also have a podcast out which is called the Women Who Fight podcast, and it is on Spotify, and I'm sure it's on some other platforms as well. As always, if you want to follow myself, then you can find me on Instagram or Twitter @raspberry_ape. You can also check out my website, which is raspberryape.com. You can find my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/raspberryape. And what else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, then please feel free to share it with your friends, family, and whoever else you want to. And if you want to leave me a review on iTunes or Spotify, that is, as always, greatly appreciated. And I guess on YouTube as well, if you want to leave if you listen on YouTube, you want to leave a comment there, go ahead and do it. As always, thank you very much for listening, and I will catch you next time. Take it easy.